When I grew up, I'd always play out with the same group of kids. We all went to the same school together. I didn't actually live on the same side of town as them. Basically, the area that I grew up in had one big road that went down the middle, and it kind of divided them off pretty nicely. It made it a little bit of a pain to get over to the other side because the crossings were really slow, but that wasn't too much of an issue. The side of which I grew up in probably wasn't the best out of the two sides. There also wasn't really that much to do here. It made me get bored quite quickly. This was just basically before there was really video games or you couldn't really play them online. So obviously you get quite bored and you didn't end up doing much else. The only way that you could get around was by using your pedal bike. I don't have an issue with this. I actually have quite a nice one and I was really happy for having it. At the time, my brother would come with me sometimes when we'd play. Basically, we'd just agree what time we wanted to meet up at and just call each other on the house phones and then go outside. So it was pretty common for me to make my way across to the other side of town to play with some of my friends and just hang out there and relax generally. You know, basically just have a good time together. These were pretty good days. I absolutely love going to the store to get the big bottles of Pepsi. This is when you had them in the glasses and I thought that was kind of cool. It was something that I always looked forward to. To be honest, I'm not sure how that I didn't end up with diabetes because how bad my diet was. I just constantly ate bad food, but that was fine. While we were playing there was always rumours about some kind of weird house and some weird cave accompanying it that nobody could ever seem to locate. But we'd hear rumours about this off a few other people, and in fact actually some adults that warned us against going there. They said that if you ever see the old burnt out house or that cave, don't go into it. I mean, firstly, the way that you had to get there was through an area which flooded very often. When you walked through it, it honestly looked like an atomic bomb had hit the place. There was all kinds of downed trees and stuff over there, and all kinds of other things that you obviously couldn't move. It would actually make it a really dangerous cross into at the same time, which is one reason that you didn't really want to go there. They did have one log which had actually been cut down and made into some kind of bridge. The funny thing is, it didn't have barriers though on either side, so you could have easily fell. Not like the drop was very big, but I guess maybe in winter it could have been a lot more dangerous. However, we would so often go across there and just have an explore. I mean, you know how it is, when you're young and you've got that inquisitive nature, then anything like this you kind of jump at, just to get out there and have some adventure. We were so bored other than this. I mean, we had some sports like baseball and stuff which we would play, but we didn't do it too often. Thing is, there wasn't that many places that we could go and play at really. Where I lived, they had this really stupid habit of locking up everything really early. I mean, basically they'd close it a second that you'd got out of your school, and then it was dark, so there wasn't much you could do. The ones that were actually open also kind of had a way of attracting weirdos and dodgy people. You know, like the people that just let their dogs run wild and chase absolutely everything and made no effort to call them back, or just the drug dealers, just not a nice place. Especially not where you'd want to go when you were young, even though there was quite a big group of us. So anyway, we like coming to this place for a number of reasons, but the main one was just to get away from everything and just to have some fun together. We were always trying to look for that place though, but we could really never find it. We thought it was just rumours and that maybe this never existed. So we're all playing out here one day when one of us says, you know that cave? I think I know where it is. And basically we're following him. I actually had to bring my bike and so did a few others of us as we went further into the woods trying to locate it. It's not really easy to pass through here though, to be honest, because I don't know what they were, but some kind of plants, like you know the ones with the little thorns and stuff. And the ones that sting you, I don't know what they're called, but they're on either side of us, other than the big trees, were the only thing that was safe from this, so it wasn't very nice passing through here. Luckily I had long socks on so it didn't get my ankles, but I knew some of my friends were suffering. They actually try and drive on their bikes through it, but it's too exhausting, so it wasn't really the best of places. But we had faith in him, and he keeps on leading us on this adventure. Now, none of us were actually entirely convinced that he was going to be able to find it. I've heard so many stories of similar things off of other people before, saying that they've got a friend who can show them where something is and it doesn't come true. But I don't know. Just seeing the new scenery actually made it relatively interesting. It was kind of like bright but not too bright, if that makes sense. Like, you know, not when the sun's setting, but when it's cloudy and it's hard to tell exactly what time of day it was. Well, it's just like that. But we keep on going. We do this for quite a long time and we don't really seem to be getting anywhere. We were going so far now. Well, eventually we come up to an area which is much more rocky. Oh my god, what if this guy's actually right? I seriously didn't know what I'd do if we actually found this place. I mean, I was going to be too scared to go in truthfully. I could already feel my little heart pounding, and I was actually nervous about this. I didn't want to let on to the others, but I remembered thinking to myself that what if we actually have to go in this cave? It's not like any of us had torches or lights or anything, so we're not going to be able to see too well. And we come up to a Y shape in the road. We can either go downhill or across some bridge, and my friend actually stops for a while telling us that, well, he can't quite remember what way it is. We kind of looked at each other confused. It actually didn't dawn on us at the time, but we're very lost now, and we're going to have an issue actually getting home if we're not careful. But my friend would not stop going on about how that we're going the right way. So we eventually decided to go across the bridge. The main reason for that is that it's easier for us to go across on our bikes when my friend stops. He says, "Hey, look at that," and he turns and sprints on the other way until he jumps on his bike, and a few of the other guys all ride on their bikes trying to get out of there. Yes, they've played the abandonment trick on me. They've took me out here, and they thought it'd be funny just to ride off and just leave me on my own here. I could have easily caught up with them, but I just couldn't be bothered. I don't know why, I just basically turned and watched them going away. So off they went, and I just sat there, just taking it all in for a minute. Now, a lot of you might have thought that I was panicking, but I just wasn't for some reason. Now, I was left with some kind of ultimatum. I had to either press on alone or just head back to the relative safety. And probably for the first time in my life, I decided to be brave. I think it felt kind of nice to be on my own out here, so I just started driving very slowly on my bike, going across the bridge. I was taking advantage of the fact that I could drive along some flat ground and not really have too many issues here, so I do so. I'm doing it for a while and I eventually come up to an opening with lots of rocks everywhere. This is great, I think to myself. I'm now at a place where that I can ride my bike really easily, so I start doing so. I'd actually never really driven on rocky places like this before in my life, so I thought it was really cool to be able to do it on my bike. It looked really beautiful here. Now I've got some water on me, so every so often I'm just drinking that and periodically going to the toilet. I probably drank too much water, but I like the fact that it's making my backpack less heavy. At the time I thought it could make me go faster, and I get up to an area that seems oddly familiar. I don't know why that is. I've not been here before, but I seem to know what way I'm going. I rest for a moment and notice something odd. There's some kind of markings on one of the rocks close to me. It kind of looks like if you draw stick figures with their hands up in a Y shape. There was about 8 of these figures there, then a much larger one further off onto another rock. I think this is odd. I run my hand along it and can see that it's been there for a while. It's clear that it's been pretty well weathered since it was first put there, and I think this is kind of cool. I've not really seen much like this. Then I get a fright as I turn around and I go off balance. My bike has kind of went out from underneath me and I start falling with the bike. I'm still riding it, but I'm gaining momentum and my brakes don't seem to be working. This happens for probably about 10 seconds before I finally lose control and slam into a rock which throws me off my bike. I get up and I turn round and start panicking. My bike is ruined. My very front wheel has entirely broken. It's really dented, almost as though that you took a big sledgehammer and smashed it as hard as you can. And there was no way I was going to be able to use it unless I become a tricycle expert. I was in big trouble now. My mom was going to kill me. She literally just brought me it. I love that bike so much. It took me a while to calm down from this actually, and I start telling myself that it's going to be okay. Just keep going, just keep going. So now I continue on foot, which probably wasn't the best of ideas. But like I said, I seemed to know which way I was going. For some reason, I just instinctively knew that if I kept going down, I would probably get to this cave. That was weird. I sat there for a while, and I can see what I think is one more person near the mouth of where I think the cave might be, and then another appear. I'm actually really far away, but I decide just to stop and observe them. I really can't see. I try to cuff my hands to get a bigger view, or just to see what else is going on around myself and block out some of the sunlight, but it doesn't make much of a difference. So I just continue walking down the rocky trail. This is actually a welcome relief from the other area of which I was walking upon. It's a lot easier travelling down here, and I feel okay. I was really bummed out about my bike though. I just can't stop thinking about it. It was so perfect. I just loved that thing. I knew too that it was going to be a while before I could get another one, so I'm pretty deflated now, but I just keep going. I suddenly realised why I seem to know which way to go. I think it's all of the stories, all the way people described it is just like this, almost down in some kind of valley of such with rocks on either side of you, and the cave almost perfectly waiting for you in the middle, just tempting you with its calls. So I keep going now further and further, and it becomes more bright. I'm glancing up occasionally, trying to see what's going on, but I can't see any more movement. I do notice what appears to be some kind of orange tent though, and a green one, which might be a rock next to it. This is on another hill a bit further away. I remember the only logical possible explanation to this is that some other people have went here to explore just like I did. And in my young mind, I think, yeah, they're going to be excited to see me. Now, I do notice something that I can't be sure wasn't a figure of my imagination at the time, but I'm almost certain that one of the figures seems to make a Y pose, very similar to what I'd seen before. It was really weird. It was literally just like what I'd seen on the rocks. I can only see the one figure at the time, but I think this is quite weird. I think maybe they're just doing it for, I don't know, I want to find out. I have to have a battle plan now. I decide the best thing to do is go up towards where the tents are, just to have a little explore and figure out what they're doing. Because even though I was naive, I wasn't entirely unsensitive to danger. My mum would argue that this isn't the case, and she still would now, but it didn't matter. I was there to investigate. So I kept on going. I'm not too far away from their tents, and as I walk closer, I notice that the wind starts picking up. Now, I've noticed that this isn't the only time this had happened. There was a few other times that the wind had picked up all of a sudden when I was out here like this, or at least on my own in the woods, and it was definitely odd. It kind of sounded like I was going up a mountain a bit, which is bizarre because there was no wind up until this point. I'm now going through an area which brings me closer to the woods and closer to the cave. I actually decided to follow the harder path which would lead me to the tents. I can make them out more clearly now. One is definitely orange and the other's kind of more hidden. I don't know if it has a camouflage pattern or if it's just green, but it's very difficult to see. I can only really figure out that it's a tent because of its close proximity to the other one. I decide to go into quiet mode now, basically not walking on the rocks making sounds. I was quite small then, so I'm not really bothered about standing up. I knew I could crouch down for a little bit. I suddenly hear some kind of sound. It sounded like a metal gate opening and it really scared me. I actually duck down and hide under a tree when I hear it. I waited here for probably about 5 minutes or so, looking around trying to see if there's anybody else here but me. I don't see anyone. Actually, it sounds more like a chain moving now that I hear it once more. So I just stop and wait. I'm really not sure what this is. I'm inquisitive but more scared, so I just stayed there for a while. About 20 minutes or so pass when I eventually decide that it's in fact safe enough for me to leave my retreat, and I start moving once more. So I'm making my way out and I get closer to the tents trying to be really quiet, and I notice the tents moving. I think, yeah, they've probably only just moved here or something and not really set it up properly, but I can't be absolutely sure. So I just wait and wait and wait, until eventually I notice something. The tent looks like it's in horrible condition. It looks like it's seen lots of storms. I now stand up and stop crouching as I'm trying to see it better, and I make my way closer to the other tent. That's odd, that looks exactly the same. I can actually see parts of it moving in the wind, almost in sync with the wind I can hear from being slightly further away. So now I go closer and closer until I can see that nobody's around. I feel confident enough to just walk normally on the rocks now, and I edge closer and closer, slowly creeping up to them. I go to the orange tent first, and this thing doesn't look like it's in good condition whatsoever. I can see it more so now. I crouch down and poke my head into the tent. Through that hole, can see no one, just that this thing was abandoned long ago. For some reason this puts my mind at ease and I feel comforted by knowing this. I now turn around and go up to the green tent. I get a little bit closer to it and I realise that I can't see into this. I have to open the zipper. I go to do so and the door's already opened. It smells really bad in here too. I only looked for a second, but I can see no one's in here. So I stand up with the sound of the wind all around me. That's really weird. Why would people have tents set up here and just seem to leave them like this? The first one didn't look like it was too cheap either, so I think this is a bit weird. Well, anyway, I've got to get to that cave. I stand up for a moment with the wind in my ears and I just take a second to think, do I want to do this? Well, yeah, I decide that I want to. I've got to see what it is. I've got enough time in the day to just make it back, and the sun's come up now, and I feel more confident. I'm constantly looking out for different people, by the way. I probably should have mentioned this more, but I was being incredibly vigilant at the time of this. So I keep making my way down, and there it is. The cave. Wow. Beautiful. More pretty than I expected it to be. It looks very warm and inviting. I spend a while trying to figure out if I should definitely go or not. I realise that I'm probably not going to be able to see too much, and I quickly look around for my backpack. Oh yes, I think to myself as I realise that I have a lighter in the pack. I didn't smoke or anything, just sometimes we'd like to make little campfires on our adventures, and I had it for this. Great, and that thing was almost full. I tested it out and I accidentally burned myself. I realise I'm going to have to be careful or not do it when I'm actually outside in the wind. I take a look around one more time just to make sure nobody else is here, and then I notice it again, more strange markings on some of the rocks close to here. What is that? I just don't know why I keep seeing them. It seems weird that they're all leading up to the cave. I'm stuck here pondering why this would be here when I hear the wind in my ears once more. It kind of snaps me out of it, and I run my hand along it again. I don't know why, maybe it was OCD or some kind of habit, but I do so, then decide that I should just keep pressing on now, and be strong. I start slowly making my way towards the cave, and my feet feel incredibly heavy. I've got the lighter in my hand. My hand's quite cold from gripping it so much. I think I stopped the blood flow, so I stopped doing that after a little bit. I start making my way towards the mouth of the cave when I see something further in. I don't know exactly what it was, but I can definitely see something there. Maybe it's some kind of glowing mushrooms or something, or fireflies. I don't know. It's definitely something with a faint glow there. So I step in, and I can hear what sounds like water dripping. This gave it a really creepy sound, especially mixed with the sounds of the wind outside. I'm gonna keep going, but it definitely felt odd. It kind of felt like you put me into the scene of some kind of haunted house or something, or you know the movies where the world's ended through, I don't know, atomic bombs or something, and you're out in a wasteland and the explorers just come outside? Or I don't know if any of you have played the Fallout 3 game when he just leaves the vault. It was just like that. It was just kind of weird. I suppose it did look a little bit like it if I think of it now. But I decided to go in. I don't flash the light immediately using my torch. I thought I should let my eyes adjust a little bit. I still had some senses about me. I take my steps now in sync with the dripping of the water in the background. Drip, 1 foot, drip, another foot, and so on. I'm just constantly doing this, trying not to be noticed. I now realise that I need to flick on the light because I've just walked into a rock and I'm scared I'm gonna hurt myself. Okay. I slowly raise the lighter up with my hand trembling a little bit and flick on the light. Nothing changes. I can see that there's something along the sides of the walls. I don't know what it is, actually. Maybe it's like slime or something, but it's almost like a strange liquid which is a little bit reflective. The cave seems really dark too. I mean, it doesn't match the outside rocks which are white, it's really dark. The only reason I could really see where I was going is because of the reflections of this. I realise now that I'm gonna have to keep my lighter on, which is okay. I just set the flame to the brightest setting, and I start making my way forward. It was actually getting too hot for me, so I decided to use part of my jumper. I know that's a stupid idea because it could have set me on fire, but I wasn't thinking straight. I can't see anything glowing now because where I'm going. It's hard to describe it, but it's kind of like I could only see maybe 1 or 2 feet in front of myself, if that. I knew I was definitely progressing the right way because of the dripping sound going on every so often, getting louder. But that wasn't comforting. Then, I hear a sound again, kind of like a metallic one. It sounded like a heavy chain swinging. That's odd. I drop down very quickly, turning off the light as I do so. I couldn't be certain if it was because of the wind or not, but it was definitely odd, and I don't know where this is coming from. For some reason I get it in my head that now I kind of want to get a move on to try and make my way away from whatever this thing is. So I quickly flicker on the light again, and I can see the faint glow of something. It's not too bright, and I presume that it's going to be a big column of glowing mushrooms or something. I don't know. So I make my way closer and closer. I realise that because of the way the rocks are, I'm not going to be able to see it until I'm right there. It was like looking down into something, but you've got rocks obstructing your view. So I go a little bit further, turning off my light for a second so I can feel along the walls. They're very cold and slimy. It doesn't smell bad, so I've not got an issue doing so. I now get to the corner and decide to flick on my light, holding it out in front of me, extending my hand. I don't know why, this made me feel more safe for some reason. I felt like, well, if they can see my hand first, if there is anyone in here, they're going to react to it or say something, so it gives me an extra second just to run. But that doesn't happen. I did so for about 4 seconds before waving my hand around, thinking that maybe I could taunt something, but nothing happens. Okay, let's go. Well, I turn off the light for a second and I realise that it's glowing brighter now, these mushrooms. Then, I come around the corner and I'm amazed to see so many of these different mushrooms everywhere. There was probably about 7 or 8 different sections of it, and I can't make out exactly what it is at first. I flick on the lighter again, and I realise that they're all connected together. I hold my lighter up towards where some are, and then I realise it's got a different shape, which seems somehow familiar, but I don't know how to describe it. It takes a second, but I realise that these seem to be bones, which is somehow glowing very slightly. It almost looked like if you put the glow-in-the-dark paint off of a watch, which was really fading away onto them. And I can't make out what they are. I do something probably stupid, but I didn't know what else to do. I take out some of the scrunched up newspaper that we used to use before to make fire, and some other things. I actually had quite good materials to make a torch because of having firewood and things like that. So, in the dark, I managed to set this up and tie everything together with the newspaper to make a big torch. It takes a while and I can't seem to set fire to it, until eventually, boom, off it goes. Now it takes about 2 seconds as I kind of blind myself as I was staring straight at it, and then I illuminated the whole room. I'm now stood, almost surrounded by 7 or 8 skeletons, all turned to face me. I can now see that only one of them has a very faint glow, the others are barely at all, and I'm just stuck in a trance there. I wipe up my eyes quickly and slap my head, probably about 5 or 6 times, starting to slowly panic. What the heck is this? I've never seen skeletons before in real life, so I don't know why they're all like this. Some of them are just piles in the corner, but some of them look like they've been propped up to look like they're actually people. I, for some reason, just stayed here for about 1 or 2 minutes, just taking it all in. The cave actually goes on even further when I hear the metal sound again, from now even deeper into the cave. That was my cue to get out of there. I'm very scared that something's going to come from deeper in the cave, so I start moving backwards very slowly and very carefully, feeling along the wall. I trip myself over and out goes the light at the same time. Oh, come on, you've got to be kidding me, I say to myself, as I turn around, not really able to see now, fummaging around for my lighter. Eventually, I'm able to find it, and I'm feeling along the wall. I keep expecting to hear the metallic sound behind myself again, but I don't hear much of anything. I don't know where my torch has gone, so that's really frustrating. I wish I actually had a flashlight, an actual source of light that wasn't so basic, but I didn't think to. I can now see the mouth of the cave, and I start making myself more and more confident, trying to talk to myself positively in my head. As soon as I get to a part that I'm in a clearing, I sprint out of there. I don't know why I felt so scared. Probably because I've never been in that situation before, but it was weird. I felt fear in reverse. Maybe it was my body taking a while to react to what had just happened. But I was more scared running than when I was actually there. Would you believe it? So I decided that I'm gonna run just the exact way that I've come. Luckily, this part is downhill, so I don't have too much of an issue with it. I didn't look around, I was just more focused on the ground. It was almost like everything in my surroundings went blurry except for what was directly in front of me. and I keep up the pace. I'm running, and now I'm almost about halfway to where the ground level's out again, and I have to go back uphill. I stop for a second before sprinting and turn to look, and I can see the figures once more. It kind of looked like two ants because where I was, but they're at the mouth of the cave, and you can see that they're searching for something, almost like when you've just disturbed someone and they're trying to get their bearings about them. I take a deep breath and start sprinting. This is all the fuel that I needed. Now I am religiously looking over my shoulder watching them as they grow further and further away, becoming smaller and smaller. Now the last thing I could see of them is that they both went back into the cave. God, what have I just discovered? What have I just unearthed, I think, as I'm making my way back now. I was actually really scared when I see the markings on the rock that I'd seen before again. It kind of gave me a surge of adrenaline as I realised that everything was linked somehow, and I didn't like it. I luckily still have a little bit of water, but drink it too fast and it actually makes me vomit a bit. I was so scared I didn't even stop to do this. I did it on the go and keep going. I don't know where my bike is, but I was probably too scared to notice it, as I'm now making my way through the forest. It was pretty tough going, but I didn't feel too much pain at the time. My legs are definitely starting to get more numb now as I keep going. I make my way back into the bigger part of the forest that I was familiar with. Now the sun was still shining quite high in the air, and I think that gave me some form of confidence knowing that I'm not out here in the dark. So I keep on going until eventually I get up to where the familiar area is, and I'll be able to make my way back home now. As I get there, I realise that none of my friends are there, and I can't believe that they've abandoned me like this. I can't believe what I'd seen. I eventually make it to the relative safety of a little bit of civilization, and I'm trying to keep up kind of like a fast walking pace to get back home. I actually hear a cop car, and for some reason it made me panic. I thought somehow I'd trespassed and they were looking for me, so I actually ducked down waiting for them to go. I say to myself, come on man. I almost felt like I was on some kind of secret mission, just trying to get back out of here. Well, eventually I make it back to my home just in time for dinner. I now have a new danger and fear. My mum. What's she gonna do when she realises the bike's gone? She says, hey, where's your bike? And thinking on my feet, I said, oh yeah, Matt's got it. I gave it to Matthew and his brother for the week, and she says, oh, that's so kind of you. And I didn't say much of anything. I just ate my dinner and then went straight up to bed. I could tell I was exhausted, but I didn't know how much so. I actually slept through until maybe 1 PM the next day, so I got over 12 hours sleep and I felt good for resting. It's probably been about 20 or so years since this experience, and I never actually found out what was in those caves. Whether they're actually real skeletons or not, or why one of them seemed to be glowing, or who those people were. I ended up never going back to that area once more, but for all I know they could still be out there, and something horrible could have happened. I don't sleep easily at night, and sometimes I just can't stop thinking about it and it makes me panic. This occurred when I was about 15 or 16. I was also with a friend of about the same age and his dad. We were exploring the woods behind our houses. We lived in the same neighbourhood. We went back into these woods many times to hike around and play paintball. One day though, we decided to go a little deeper in the woods just to check it out. A little background is that this is an old forest growth / protected wetlands area with a few square miles that are surrounded by roads on all 4 sides located in the northeast United States. For a while, we were wandering along. It was mid/late spring, so the forest is pretty lush and green, when one of us sees a small patch of white coming through the woods. I mean, it stood out quite easily in contrast to the green leaves, so we decided to investigate, and the three of us headed off in directions towards this mysterious white spot coming through the leaves. If you've ever walked through dense woods, you'll know how difficult it is to go in a straight line because of fallen logs and brush. Anyway, we keep walking towards this object for what seems like a while, but this object still hasn't come into focus. It looks like it's a white blob, and it's just getting further and further away from where we spotted it. We didn't think too much of it at this point, or at least I didn't, and continued walking in the direction of this thing. It must have happened 2 or 3 times that we'd walk towards this thing for a few minutes, stop and notice that we aren't getting any closer. Now by this point, I think there was a little tension building, but nothing out of the ordinary. At some point though, as we're getting closer, we do notice the object is starting to fill out. We can clearly see now that it's a tiny white house on a hill. I'd say the structure was about the size of a shed you might keep your lawnmower in. We were excited because how often do you come across something like that? It's still a little ways away, but again, very obvious that this little white house is what we had seen and were walking towards. So we continue towards the little house, and we lose sight of it momentarily as we go up over another hill, but as soon as we come to the top of the hill, the house is gone. Now we're really confused and both look at each other but keep walking up the hill that we've seen the house on. This last part happened pretty quickly. We get to the top of the hill, still looking at the other hills close by to see if maybe we just turn around or something and we'd see the little house, until one of us noticed an old foundation at the grounds where there obviously a house had once been. The shape of the foundation was exactly the size of this mysterious vanishing white house. I barely had time to notice the foundation when all 3 of us heard a growl, which sounds like it's getting louder until it's almost as loud as a chainsaw. Nothing was said, but the 3 of us, including my dad's friends, all sprint out of the woods in the direction that we've come. I don't recall ever discussing what happened to the 2 other friends I was with that day. Since this happened, I tried looking on Google Maps for some kind of indication that the house was there, but it's just a forest which is too thick. About 1.5 years ago, I told my brother what happened and we went back into those woods looking for the house's foundation, but I didn't find anything. Although, our search wasn't very thorough though. It was winter, so it's pretty cold and had snow on the ground. But it'd be hard to pick out where the house was meant to be because of the snow. One of the weirdest stories that I've ever heard happened is not my own, but my father's. My father works as a forest service worker, and he had many weird encounters over his years. This one in particular gave me chills all throughout my childhood, and it made me constantly just question things. Now, I'll tell this exactly how my father's told me and how that he's wrote it down for me, so sit back and enjoy. I think it's truly bizarre. Now, to start out, everything's going pretty well in life. I'm happy and my wife is now pregnant. Now this is going to be our 2nd child. We already had our other one who's about 1 now, and we're really excited to have a 2nd. We had a boy and we were hoping for another girl. It turned out that we had another boy, but that was just as much joy into our lives. Those who haven't experienced parenthood don't understand how it changes your life sometimes, and how it changes your approach to taking risks. I know that I certainly had the same feeling too. Now, where I was based at for my job, I didn't really encounter anything too heavy. I hadn't been working this role for that many years, and there was other more experienced guys out there. In fact, a lot of the time I'd actually get quite frustrated because I really truly wanted to do more, but I just wasn't able to. Sometimes there would be things that the other guys would know that I could do, and they would just rush off to do it before I had the chance to, and it was so frustrating. I enjoyed being out there, don't get me wrong, but I was kind of stuck doing more computer stuff and just, I guess, the boring things. Now, at this place, I knew that I could progress, but it was going to take years. They basically offered me all the training and everything, but my god, it was slow. The thing was, I was probably smarter than all of the people there, just not being given any opportunities that I needed to progress. It was almost like they'd given me this form, and it said everything I needed to do, but there were holes in it that they couldn't see, and it made me feel really uncomfortable. I was quite tempted to join the Navy. I actually wanted to become a Navy SEAL at the time. It wasn't really possible because of some of the injuries I had, but I know that if I really pushed myself, I probably could have overcome them. But the problem was, even sometimes when I was doing this job, even just hiking around and doing my normal things, I would have a pain that I couldn't seem to stop from the bottom of my foot. I actually still have issues with it today. I'm not quite sure why it started, but yeah, it's just something I get on with. So on this particular day, it was just the same. There was more exciting call-outs and things to go and do, but literally before I could even get to the radio to say I would do it, someone would say I'm on it and would already be up there with their coffee in their hand, taking the last sips of their coffee before flying on out the door and to go and have all the fun. Yeah, it kind of really sucked doing this, but I guess it gave me more time to think and just relax a bit. The problem is, if you're like me, that time very quickly lends to boredom. I started going through some of the records and some of the reports. I basically had to reorganize them because some people in this office area, they would just throw everything onto a desk and not do anything. They would only look for items if they needed it, which of course is a very stupid idea and wastes everyone's time, but back in my day, I guess that's how it was. So I start reading through some reports. There was a few pretty creepy things on there. Some people would say that they had a feeling, like an intense feeling of fear that they couldn't describe, accompanied by a knocking on some of the trees. They were never able to locate the source of this sound, and they thought it was just animals, but it came up quite often over the years. Then I heard a really strange one. Apparently, there was a ranger that worked here, and a lot of the other people thought that he was going crazy. I was reading a second-hand account of what had happened to him. Apparently, something had spoke to him and told him the future. Weirdly though, when I looked back through another account, which was more recent than that one, some of the things that he said actually come true. And the person making the report actually noted that and how weird it was. Upon further investigation, it turned out that this person thought that he had spoke to beings or something. I don't know, kind of like aliens? They didn't describe it very well, just very vaguely. Now it seems like many of these cases were dismissed. There were other weird things too, like a specific area where you'd feel very hot. Completely unnaturally, to the point that you'd actually question if there was some kind of hot spring there. Or something weird that shouldn't have been there. But again, they could never find the source of it. The thing that made this even more bizarre is that eventually the plants and trees and everything in the area would start to die, so you basically knew for certain that something was definitely off there. Now I decided that I had to get out and do the very minimum just to not be in the office, and that's what I did. I remembered setting out and I was being a little bit more paranoid than normal. I think all these stories were just playing in my head. I remembered I kept thinking that I saw something walking through the tree line above, ahead of me, always maintaining the higher ground. It kind of just trailed alongside me. It's really hard to describe, but was truly creepy. Now I don't know what it was, but I think it was some kind of large animal there. Not big enough to be a bear, but certainly weird. I did think maybe it was a hiker out there, but it wasn't possible. I thought that was bizarre. I remember thinking to myself that you've just learnt the power of human potential in the mind, and it was pretty scary to me. Now, life goes on. We probably get to about a month or 6 weeks in, and again, they're just not training me properly. It's kind of really annoying because they'll complain at me for doing something when it's exactly how somebody's told me to do it. And they'll say, oh no, just do it confidently. But then, they'll say, why did you do that? And you'll explain that's how you're trained, and they wouldn't seem to listen, and it was kind of like a hostile group. I didn't end up staying there for too long, but I'll get to that later. So what do? once again get reserved to balancing the books and just doing the normal work. Now this is actually at a time before we had computers, so it did make days very boring too. The problem I found is that some people just did not have good handwriting. I've never been the best at reading others' handwriting, but especially in these situations, my god, it was like some of these people had honestly made an effort to write as illegible as possible. And again, if you can't read it, they complain, so I kind of become an expert of reading these things eventually. And again, every so often there's weird reports. I realise too, quite often when it's recorded, people just think, oh, it's the other guy not paying attention. Maybe he wants everyone to look at him and stuff like that. At least that's on the report conclusion, but I had a feeling that something was off when I kept on seeing the reportings of some kind of beings out there. This spanned over a number of years too, and long before I was there. They all seemed to be described as relatively the same. They called them the forest walkers. Apparently they seemed to be quite tall, and they would walk in almost a weird limp motion. The weird thing is that they would be silent too, and if you approached them, weird things would happen. Some people said they felt almost like they were high. Others said that they would just know things they couldn't have otherwise and stuff like that. I don't know if I believe in the supernatural that much, or at least at the time I didn't, but I just considered that these were just things that happen when you've been out in the woods for too long by yourself. Now eventually as time increased, and I started complaining to the higher ups about the issues I was having, I started to get out more and do more interesting things. I even got to rescue a few people too, which is a really cool feeling. I don't know if you've ever experienced it before, but there's something so cool about knowing that you preserved human life. You stepped in and you made a big difference and impact for someone. It's not something I'd felt before in other jobs too, so I was quite happy. Now, as I go out for a patrol one evening, I remembered having a strange feeling that the air was different. There was almost some kind of metallic smell that I couldn't quite describe. I was concerned that I had some kind of illness or that I accidentally got something on my nose, but no matter how much I wipe my nose, I can't seem to get rid of the feeling. And there was almost some kind of static in the air. You know, like when you have static electric and just before you feel the buzz, it was kind of like that. Now that's when I feel something. I can tell something's looking at me and I stop to turn around and see what it is. And then I can make out some kind of figure. It's probably about 20 feet away. It's wearing kind of like a dark coloured robe, but when it gets closer it appears more white. It walks with a weird limp and I can't believe my eyes. I actually rub my eyes quickly, not sure for a second if I'm dreaming, and it's gone. Now I think this is pretty creepy. I want to figure out what this is, so filled with excitement I actually jogged towards where it was. Now I couldn't tell you too much else about it, but just that it completely vanished. I probably spent another hour myself actually searching the surrounding areas, just to see if I could find something, anything there to explain what I'd just seen, but alas, I come up blank. There's nothing there but myself. Now I'm actually a little bit irritated because I don't want to seem stupid. I really don't want to become like one of the people whose stories I've read, probably to be dismissed later on the same way that I dismissed some of theirs. But currently, it seems like I'm going to have no option but for that to be the case for myself. Yeah, it sucked really. I go back eventually and tell them what happened. Now, no one believes me, which is what I expected, and they say, yeah, you're too junior to be going out there and investigating things like this. I was pretty fed up again. I come from a role before where I was very well respected, and honestly the way I was being treated was really annoying me. Now a few months go on, and it becomes winter, and the going gets a little bit more tough really. It was pretty cold out there. I mean, uncomfortably so for myself. Now, I remembered on one particular day, I can't tell you specifically what I was doing, I just remembered that I was out there, that I spotted something weird, I mean really bizarre. There were these small figures, kind of limping around in the woods, again silently. Now I can't believe what I'm seeing. They're probably about 5 feet tall now, and in more of a white coloured gown kind of thing. Like I said, I didn't know what this was. I thought maybe it was something from Halloween, like decorations people put out there. And I actually wasn't too scared now. I was convinced that this wasn't actually a real thing or threat or danger, so I decided to sit back and very slowly follow these things. Now I didn't look behind myself, so there could have been more, but these things just kept on marching on, kind of down the path for a good 10 minutes longer. Now they never once seemed to notice me or so much as turn around, so again, I'm still not entirely sure what I'm seeing, but I think it's some kind of Halloween decoration that someone's playing around with. I don't know, it could be a cult, it could be anything, but I'm not too worried. I don't know if it was the size of them or what, but I just wasn't concerned. Also, there seemed to be nature interacting normally around, so that meant that these things weren't a threat, at least I thought. So this continues on until eventually they all stop at something. I stopped too, and I can see about 4 of them. I was incredibly curious as to what they were looking at, but there's no real way for me to be able to see where I'm based currently. I get closer and closer and realise that I'm going to have to take the long way round now to figure out what it is. I decide to take a stealthy approach, and I try and walk very slowly through the foliage and get around. I do make it to a pretty good horizon, and I can see in front, and I still can't figure out what they're looking at. Now I'm sure these are people now, so I become a little bit more confident, and I walk down even closer to where they are. Eventually, I ended up crashing through some of the brush, and I decide that I'm going to be more present now. Obviously these people know that I'm here, so what's the point of trying to hide away from them? I go a little bit quicker now, and eventually go round to where I think that they're facing, and I can't see their actual faces. It's kind of just dark where that their faces are completely covered up in something. Now, I crouch down to get a better look at them, and suddenly, I can hear voices in my head. They don't sound like voices I ever heard before too, and it's almost like my own voice but different. And I keep hearing different things that haven't happened yet. I hear about the birth of my son and know that it's going to be a boy. I know exactly what he's going to look like, how my career's going to go, what my wife's going to do, and some of the hardships that come up and who's going to pass away in my family. It actually makes me incredibly emotional at this point, and I almost feel like it's too much and start to cry a bit. I ended up kind of just becoming overwhelmed with my emotions, and I fall back into the dirt and stare up at the sky. The sky's very bright today, and it actually looks quite nice. After a moment, I kind of stop hearing the voices so much. They kind of just slowly fade out, like somebody slowly turning down the volume on a record, and I get up. I realise now that whatever these things are has gone now, and I'm just here alone, very confused as to what's actually just happened to me. I get up, and I'm sure there's going to be an explanation for this. I ended up scouring around for probably another hour and a half until I conclude that nothing's here. That's when my panic finally catches up with me, and I decide that I need to get back as quick as possible. I start making my way there. I eventually get back to the station and immediately write down my report. I didn't speak to anybody else about what had happened, and that's when I'm confused. I suddenly realised that what I was reading was very similar to some of the reports of what had happened years before. The ones where that people had considered the guys that were reporting it a little bit crazy or seeing things. And for that reason, I actually took the report and ended up throwing it into the trash. I didn't want my colleagues to think I was crazy. I mean, I didn't like most of them to begin with. I knew that this was going to hurt me moving on to the other areas that I wanted to work, so there was going to be no benefit of me actually posting this. And I ended up moving on and working as a ranger in different areas and doing different kinds of roles too, even being a fire service worker. Now here's the weird thing. I only realised it much later, but I did have a son, and he looked exactly like I knew he would. The job that I changed into is exactly what I heard I would. My wife's role too. Also, some family members that died, they were the exact people who I was told would do so as well. Now suddenly I felt kind of a weird fear come over me, almost like a wash and flood of emotions coming back, realising that something had contacted me back then, and for whatever reason wanted me to know what was going to happen. I can't put my finger on why this happened or how it happened to me. I just know what I saw was real, and that I wasn't the only person that saw those kinds of things out there. Lots of my other colleagues had experienced some very similar things, and I just don't know what to make of it all. Now this is an experience which happened to me in the spring of 2018. I had a few which could be considered paranormal in life, but this was the most recent one, and unnerving. I'm an avid outdoorsman, and love to hunt and camp around the Francis Marion and Sumpter National Park. Back in 2018, I took my young son and dog out to a remote area in the National Forest to test out a new camper shell on my recently purchased truck. We found a secluded area of a dirt road, made dinner, and then packed it in for the night as soon as it got dark. Around 11 PM at night, I sat up and looked out the back, due to the sound of a dog growling. In the distance, I saw what looked like hundreds of small white balls of light darting around, hovering a few seconds and slowly converging on our campsite. They just looked like dust orbs that you've seen on videos, but these were producing light in a completely dark forest. They then surrounded my truck, and it felt weird almost seeing like hundreds of them. They're like a soft white light, and they don't blink. They just kind of float around. And then I finally work up the nerve to open the truck and lit a lantern, and promptly they disappear. After turning off the lights and locking up, they come back. My son was fast asleep, thank goodness. I watched him until I fall asleep around 1 AM. The next morning when we tried to leave, the battery on the truck was dead. There wasn't any lights in the back cab where we would have used any power, and a week later we actually had to replace the electrical control module. Not sure what happened. The area that I grew up in is the one where I work now. It's always cold where I live. It feels like it's constantly dark and gloomy. I mean, honestly, I don't ever think we really come out of winter. It had some perks though. Visibility could be good sometimes. That's if it wasn't too foggy. Especially in the winter time, I kind of like the yellowy glow on the floor from the different leaves that would go down there. The only problem was you were constantly damp, and that could be quite frustrating at times. I work as one of the forest rangers. I'd done it for a little while, and I didn't think there was much a job could throw at me. I'd worked other jobs before, like mining specifically, which I found really difficult. I found it easy to lose your mind down there, going hours and hours without getting any daylight. It's just not good for you. Now, one thing I did notice though when I started this line of work is just how quiet it is. Sometimes it could be a good thing to be out there alone, but sometimes it really wasn't. That was probably the hardest thing to me to get adjusted to, and also how dark the forests are. I mean, even in daytime, where it was always raining, you couldn't always see as far as you'd like to, but the trees were lifeless, mostly, or at least in the winter. You'd even see some dead ones thrown about on the ground, which the storm had kicked up. There was all different kinds of rumours about what had happened out here. There was something that I realised while I was surveying though. I heard a gunshot. Now, this was one single gunshot, but it sounded like a rifle. The thing is, I only connected the dots after it had happened, but I felt something just brush past me. I didn't hear a sound, but there was a click in a tree, then the gunshot sound. Then it became apparent someone was shooting shots near me. I screamed out, hey, what on earth are you doing? And started swearing, thinking it was a hunter. I screamed, you could have killed me. And I then ducked down for a second, trying to figure out where they are. I'm trying my best to do some kind of scouting, but I don't really know what I'm doing. I think because of the direction that I believe the bullets come from, that I'm in good cover here and I shouldn't be seen. The problem is, I've got to get moving to safer grounds now. I look around and I really can't hear anything, and I actually wonder if it was something else. Maybe it was something explosive. Maybe somebody was trying to take the trees down illegally and it was a bit of shrapnel that come off. Seems like it was a good thing if that was the case, because at least nobody was trying to kill me. Or hunting and just doesn't know how to aim their gun. So I ended up walking normally after this realization. I'm now walking towards an area which has some good lighting, so I know that I'm going to be relatively safe if I follow this path. But I couldn't shake the feeling that was definitely strange. Anyway, I've still got a few more checks to do. To be honest, this is actually the easiest part of the job, where that I well and truly don't actually have to do much. I mean, literally, I'm just walking around. The pay was alright, but it wasn't the best, and it was actually quite frustrating, to be honest. I mean, the job wasn't too difficult, but I just felt tired every day. It's honestly like I come home from work and I just have to lay there for a while just to recover. I think it's from being on my feet so often out there, and I think being cold often takes its toll on you in other ways. I'd send out so many job applications, but because I didn't have a high education, I had a really hard time getting opportunities, which really wasn't the best. I mean, come on. I knew how good I was, and I knew the jobs before that had been quite challenging, so I definitely had skills there, but nobody seemed to be giving me an opportunity for anything. But what could I do about it? I just had to keep going with it all, I guess, but it definitely wasn't a nice feeling. It meant too that I had another night job where I would wait tables at a restaurant in a small cafe. I didn't have an issue with it, but I kind of felt a little bit degrading. At least when I was at this job walking around, I could just reflect on things and I kind of felt like I had a higher purpose. But beggars can't be choosers, and that was what I was doing. This was often on my mind out there, to be honest. I think where we rarely spoke to people on the job, I mean, you would just have all day to just get in your head and just think and think and think and think. I resorted to singing eventually, and I started doing it again now. You know, the crazy part is, I didn't always realise that I was. I would basically catch myself singing songs. I'd kind of make them up as well, because I didn't know most of the lyrics honestly, other than the main chorus. There was one other guy that I worked with, but I mean literally just the one. So we'd very rarely encounter each other out here. In fact, it was designed not to happen, because obviously if we're both bumping into each other, then we're not really patrolling correctly. But that was fine. I like to follow the train tracks sometimes. I'm not quite sure why, to be honest. I mean, the trains would come here, but so rarely. At first it looked pretty cool to see their glowing light in the night, but it also become kind of a common thing, almost like a very quiet part of the scenery, only loud when it's directly in front of you. I used to love staring down the train tracks and just looking out into what I thought was the abyss, just imagining a better future for myself. The good thing is, there's been no more shots at this point, so it's safe to presume that it was something alright, but nothing too dangerous. I decide that I'm going to report it when I get back, but now I have more surveying to do. So off I go. I keep doing my surveying and everything's basically normal, and I then find myself finishing this job and I have to hustle over to my other one, which I didn't want to do that much. But at least I'm going to be in the warm with this job. So I get in there and it's a real quiet night. There's basically one lone cop sitting at another table drinking coffee by himself, just kind of staring at it and looking. I'm not sure exactly what he's doing. He's basically just sat there kind of staring around. He was in the corner, so I guess that he did this intentionally so he could see if anybody else was around or up to trouble, but I thought, come on man, we're in the quietest part of town, there's nothing going on. I go to ask if he wants anything else, but he doesn't say anything. He just kind of looked at me. That's odd, I thought, as I decide that I'm just going to stick to myself. Usually I like to make conversation with people in here, not just for the sake of being nice, but just to have something to do. I mean, really, my god, I would get bored out here sometimes. But he doesn't say nothing to me. He just kind of keeps an eye on me. I then realise he's kind of looking through me, and he hasn't drank his coffee. I come over and offer to refill it, sticking my hand out so he knows that I'm ready to take the cup for him, but he doesn't say anything. I then sit down next to him and say, "What's wrong? You need to talk?" He then finally breaks his stare and looks up and says, "You don't want to know, buddy." I say, "What's wrong?" Again, he doesn't say too much of anything, and I just go about doing my other duties. I'm having a good clean up and stuff, and I eventually go back to him. Not quite sure why, I just felt like he had something he needed to tell someone. I mean, just anyone. So I sit down next to him and refill his cup, making it hot, and then I pour one for myself. I say, "What happened?" He says, "You know, there's someone out here and it's just crazy. The whole case is blowing my mind." I decided it's best not to ask questions because obviously he's not going to be able to say everything, but he just keeps on shaking his head at me. I say, "Come on, you'll be fine. Just put out some flyers and the whole town will be after him. What happened?" He then says that, "Well, we think there's a killer out there. People are dropping dead every so often and we just can't figure out why it's happening. This has been going on for years out here, but the last one was crazy. It was so brutal, it kind of made me not want to do this anymore." I just nodded and didn't do anything else. I knew that he probably just needed somebody to hear. Those guys have a really tough job, of which I have the absolute utmost respect for. So now anyway, I just pack up everything and tell him that we're closing soon, and he says thank you and tips me and leaves. As I'm watching that cop car pull away, I can't help but think to myself that there's definitely something up. I've never seen a cop so shaken up before, and it kinda scared me. It makes me think of the shot that happened earlier, but I think, you know what, there's no way that guy was hunting me. There's no way anybody's out there, it's just me going crazy. Who was it? Was it even a guy? I don't know. I don't really care too much. So I go back to bed that night and I'm really struggling to fall asleep. I have this problem quite often, to be honest, where that I kind of just lay there and it's like I feel tired at all the wrong times and I could sleep when I've just woken up, but not at night. My bed becomes by far the most comfortable thing in this whole world when I need to get up and do things. But when it's time to lay there and do nothing, it seems like I cannot break out of it. I'm really not sure why. But anyway, this is happening and every so often I hear a tappy type sound. Kind of sounds metallic, but kind of not. It was creepy, man, I'm telling you. I turned down the TV and I could kind of hear it in the background a little bit. Though it seems to pick up static more like a radio. I'm stood there in my kitchen trying to figure out what's happening and I decide to quickly grab a weapon. I go to grab a knife but accidentally pick up a fork. It kind of broke my concentration as I smile to myself, then grab a knife. I go around room from room turning on all of the lights, convinced that I'm going to find someone there, but there's nothing. I actually scared the life out of myself with my own reflection and I kind of stabbed out at nothing. My hand's trembling a bit and I tell myself to calm down. I'm pretty sure that if anybody is in here, whoever it is, I'm going to react quickest and end up hurting someone that might just be, I don't know, God knows. I could even be hurting myself, and that's not a good idea. So I finish my patrol and end up upstairs, and I have a quick look into the backyard. There's been some animals coming through, and I think, well, you know what, it's probably just one of them. I shouldn't have to worry too much. I've just got to be brave now. So anyway, I decided to leave the TV on this time just to make it sound like I'm in another room in case anybody else is there. I put the knife down very carefully, placing it away from myself as I return back to my bed. Good night, world, I say to myself, and I kind of blacked out. I think maybe because of the emotions of it and the fear and my heart racing, it meant that my body needed a little bit of time to just knock itself out to recover. I think that happens often with myself. So I wake up anyway, making my morning coffee, and I feel pretty good about everything. Maybe it was a good sleep, but something really kickstarts me to be in a good mood, and I just can't stop smiling. So I grab my paper and everything, and I head to my car. I reach around for the keys, and I notice something strange. There's something etched on the side of my car, of which I can't figure out exactly what it is. I then go for a closer look, and I can see my name wrote in something. I don't know what it is. It was dark and sticky, but I think, come on, the kids, what's wrong with them? I know we live in a boring place, but you've got to have better things to do than this. I mean, what kind of childhood have they got? Gosh. As I go to wipe it off, but decide not to because I don't want to ruin my clothes and I don't have any kind of handkerchief or tissue on me. So now instead, I just jump in the car and start driving to work. The drive's pretty good, but my mood was dampened a little bit from my bright and sunny one at the time that I'd woken up, and I can see some of the mountainy type hill things as the rocks come into view as I get closer to the parking area. And I'm the only car there. As expected, nobody comes here at this time of year. I'm in for yet another boring shift. So off I go, out into my job that I loved so much, but couldn't wait to leave in some ways. One of these days I'm going to get a job that I actually deserve, and I can't wait for it to come, I think to myself. I decide to walk near the stream now, and just take a while to watch the rain fall. These beautiful droplets bouncing on the water look so pretty. It's something that doesn't actually leave my mind for a while. I think, you know what, it's not all that bad here, and my optimism seems to be coming back to me. I guess my mood was coming and going in waves now, so I didn't judge it too much. So I start doing my rounds, yes, the lovely morning rounds that I dread so much, where I know everything's going to be exactly the same as the day before. So I'm walking along with my umbrella, and I'm basically pushing some of the low-hanging branches out of the way. I can't be bothered to move or duck down under them, when I suddenly hear something. It sounds like sprinting. It sounds like it's really close to me, and I turn around quickly to see who it is. I jump behind myself, and no one's there. Now that was creepy. It literally sounded like somebody sprinting past me. I don't know what it could have been. I then turn to my left and I can see somebody running, clearly injured, up ahead of me. It must be another person. I then hear one of the most nasty screams I've heard before. It sounded like an animal about to die, it really did. I see them run off for a while until they duck down, and bang, I hear it. Another shot. I immediately drop to the ground. I don't know why, I honestly become like a military commando as I take cover and shelter. I decide to bury myself a little bit on some of the foliage under me as I stay still and quiet. Who was that? What on earth is happening? I'm inquisitive, naturally, but I know the best thing to do now is just to not move. So I lay there as still as I possibly can, trying to make sense of this and what's going on surrounding me. Now, I look up slowly, and I can hear more screaming, which immediately makes me duck down again. Have you ever been hiding somewhere and you can hear a door open? I mean, even if you're just playing like hide and seek or something. Well, it was just like that fear. Oh no, they found me. And I immediately ducked down, burying my face a bit. It probably was quite hard to see me, but I wasn't so sure, so I decided to stay as still as I possibly can, like a tortoise or something. And then, bang, silence. The echoes of the round off of the rocks are really not nice. It's burned into my brain. It's like something that will not stop playing. My ears are actually ringing a little bit. I'm not sure how close whoever that is, but they must be incredibly close to me. What on earth is happening? I start shaking and really struggle to stay calm. Now I'm waiting to hear a follow-up, but nothing happens. God, I'm gonna be next, I think. Well, I stay down for 5 minutes and nothing happens. I can hear someone moving around now and it's really putting me off being there. Every so often, I can hear something encroaching in the leaves around me. It gets closer and closer, then eventually drifts off further and further, leaving me in a state of paralysis, unable to move, watching a nightmare unfold in front of me. Now, after a while, I realise that not much is happening, but I just can't move. I'm absolutely frozen to the spot. Somebody must have died right in front of me. That cop, he wasn't lying. I don't want to be that guy's next story in a calf, so I just wait there for longer. After a little while, I have to raise my head up because of being cold, and I kind of wiggle around a little bit very slowly. I realise that, God, it's got dark, really quick. I had my eyes sealed shut so strong that it actually made my eyes hurt when I regained my focus. It actually took me a while to focus on my surroundings. I must have done something to my eyes. I slowly lift my head up and peek around, and I can't see anything or anyone. It's just really dark out here and I'm very cold. I know now that if I don't get moving, hypothermia might get me, so I have to move. So I slowly get up, crouching. I'm adopting kind of like a crab walk or something as I slowly make my way up and scan around. I can't see anything. I'm expecting to see movement or something out here in the wilderness with me. A body? Multiple bodies. Witnesses, who knows, just anything. But nothing. So I then get up and start making my way in the straightest beeline which I can possibly make to the relative safety of where the lights are. But I don't know who's out here. I don't know if I'm going the right way truly, because I've not been out here like this before. I honestly felt like this can't be real. I just keep saying in my head over and over again that this cannot be real, this cannot be real. I just can't stop saying it, almost like a mantra. So I get further and further away. Eventually I pass the same stream that I'd gone along earlier, and I know that I'm not too far from getting back. I eventually make it back to the parking lot, and nobody's there. My car's there, but not much else. I'm really shaken, and I quickly get into my car. I don't even care that I've left that place completely open, and the keys are in my pocket. I just know I'm getting out of there. I start up the car, and really drive quickly. I actually kind of got stuck for a second, but I was probably in such a panic that I didn't realise I could just put it into drive and I'd get out of there. After about a minute I do so. I drive a bit crazily, kind of swerving, but eventually my nerves settle enough that I'm able to drive over to the local police station. Now the crazy thing is, I get there, it's the same cop that I saw the other day in the cafe. He takes one look at me and says, "Come in." He looks like he's very tired, like he hasn't slept for a while. He then says, "Can you show me where it was?" after I spoke to him, describing what happened. I agree, and there's 2 other cops that come with me. I'm riding in the back of their car, too shaken to drive now, and I thought, you know what, is this even safe? Are three of us going to be safe out there? I start telling them this and my worries. They say, don't worry, we're armed. I say, but no, you gotta be kidding me, you don't know how many are actually there. They then offer for me to stay in the car while they go out to investigate, and I say, yeah, that's fine. I don't know why I felt so safe in the back of that. Anybody with a gun could have just come and taken me, but I wasn't really thinking too much. I sit there and I realise just how dark it is, and it was still a bit cold in the car. They've left one of their doors slightly open, like not all the way, but you know when the lock hasn't engaged fully. But I just don't want to go out there and open it. I was really that scared. I keep going over the whole situation in my mind over and over again, thinking, gosh, what has happened? What on earth just happened? Why did this have to happen to me? And I start thinking, this is why I need to change jobs. This is why I need to get out of here. But eventually, the darkness somehow settled me a bit, and I wait. I actually fell asleep for a while, until a knock on the window wakes me up again. He says, yeah, you're right, we got him. I say, wow, where is he? What happened? He says, no, look. I then come out of the car and they say, right over there, we found a decomposing body. I say, what do you mean? Apparently, just exactly where I heard the shot, there was a body which was probably 2 or so weeks old, maybe even more, out there. I say, it's not possible, I heard it happen today. Are you sure there's not more? They say, we're pretty certain, but we're gonna get forensics off this. We're gonna find the guy doing this. They then thank me for all of the information on this, and they say just to leave it with them. They drove me back to my home, and I remember when I got back, I just couldn't take it. I've still got my car with me because that's what they drove me back in, and I drove for probably another 7 hours until I eventually reached my brother's home. I get there and tell him everything that happened in a state of deliriousness, fatigue, and just emotional exhaustion overall. He says that, yeah, I can stay with him for however long that I need, and I did for a good while. It turned out that it became a cold case and they never actually solved it. But I ended up having to relocate everything. I just couldn't handle it. It was too horrifying. I still don't know what happened to this day. Turns out that was the only body they found there too. I don't know what I walked into, but I still have the nightmares about it and wake up screaming. So this happened about 7 years ago. I was around 19 to 20 at the time and a scout leader. We had a camp in the forest. The nearest city was about 10 to 15 minutes away by car. Every year in July, we would have an international scout camp. Scouts from different countries would come to join us. I was in the preparations team, and we would go around every 2 or 3 weeks in advance to basically clean up and just get everything ready. The preparation team had about 20 people, about 10 to 12 as men, and the rest are women who are all in our late teens or early 20s. So if anybody's been a scout, they might know that the first thing in camp is setting up a flag. The flag is important in the camping game. Other scouts were constantly trying to steal the flag. If they managed to steal the flag, the lost team would have to go home. This actually never happened. No one was ever sent home. It was just a role to keep other members involved and wanting to protect the flag. Therefore, we had to constantly keep guard on it, or at least be by it. Other games involved other teams kidnapping members. All fun and games, nothing violent or harsh. It was meant to be fun but keep us alert all the time. So this is where the story begins. One night our preparation team was done with everything. The other 2 countries from Europe, about 60, people were set to arrive in the morning. We had nothing to do, so we set up a campfire and started talking and singing. We had our guards, people from the team, set up in different locations, 2 near the flag and 2 near the entrance and 2 in the woods facing the river. So we tried and decided not to go to sleep initially. But then we decided to change the guards every 2 hours. Every guard has a whistle. If an animal or person was close to the camp, They would blow the whistle as an alarm to the danger. That night, I was an hour into sleep when I heard the whistle. We all woke up and ran to the team member who had whistled. She claimed that she saw 3 white figures running fast in the forest near the setup tents. We thought that in the morning, the teams were arriving and were being creepy or just trying to sneak around to kidnap somebody or get the flag. So we all decided to stay awake but go into defense mode. We each stand guard in different locations, watching for any signs. After some time, we started hearing whistles from the deeper parts of the forest. We also started hearing what sounds like radios from different places. We saw some guys in white shirts running around the forest. Me and 2 other people decided to check the empty tents to see if there were people hiding in there, but we can't find anyone. We then start walking around and we heard laughter from a bush nearby. It sounded like a woman laughing, so we started laughing too as we thought we had heard the other scout team. Naturally, we walked to the bush without hesitation, though there was nobody there. Then we heard noises from another bush that was a little bit deeper in the woods. Then we heard a clear conversation from a few people speaking in a French accent. We could hear them so clearly that we checked but saw nothing. Then we saw a guy in a white t-shirt running fast again in front of us, but his speed was weird. He was running so fast it's as though he's sliding. Keep in mind we're in the woods at night with no lights. There's no way somebody can run like this without making a sound. Now somehow, the guy was running so quiet. It literally seemed like he was gliding. Again, we didn't feel threatened. We just had an adrenaline rush, but it was more excitement to catch them than anything else. After all, we just wanted to have fun. We were excited to see the teams again and have fun. For the next 2 or so hours, we kept hearing whistling and whispers in French, but we couldn't find a single person. It was so clear that there were a lot of people hiding around us, but we couldn't catch even one of them. The important thing to mention is that the arriving teams were not from France, so that was weird. Anyway, after 2 hours of running in the forest, I got tired. I didn't take this too seriously, so myself and a couple of friends went back to our tents. I laid down and after 10 minutes saw a car light speeding towards us. The area is not designed for regular cars to arrive. None of us actually had cars there. A bus from the near city would drop us off and pick us up there when the camp was over. We had a car coming straight towards our tents with a high beam on. It was coming so fast that we were frozen expecting it to actually hit us. It happened so quick that we can't even run. Then, suddenly it just stopped right near our tent. We heard the door open and no footsteps. Whoever it was just closes the door and left. We were shaken at that moment and it hit me that it couldn't have been anyone from the other teams. Now, we got out and learned that our teammates also had seen a jeep speeding towards our tent. We can't see anyone coming out of the car. After this, we decided to just stay awake until the morning. Throughout the entire night, we kept seeing these white-shirted men sliding around us. We couldn't see any faces, they were so fast and weird. We could hear loud laughter and whispers in French all around the camp. We could tell that there were a lot of strangers near the camp who were either messing around or trying to hurt us. The sun eventually came up and the strange things stopped. We didn't manage to catch who it was or figure out why they were there or what they were doing, and in the morning the teams arrived. We had this leaderboard meeting every afternoon where we would discuss daily plans and meals. Also, we would share anything that was interesting. When all of the team leaders arrived in the morning, they didn't even realize what had happened to us the night before. Up to this day, I really have no idea who it was. I really have no idea who they were or exactly what their plans were. This occurred when I was about 15 or 16. I was also with a friend of about the same age and his dad. We were exploring the woods behind our houses. We lived in the same neighborhood. We went back into these woods many times to hike around and play paintball. One day though, we decided to go a little deeper in the woods just to check it out. A little background is that this is an old forest growth / protected wetlands area with a few square miles that are surrounded by roads on all 4 sides located in the northeast United States. For a while, we were wandering along. It was mid/late spring, so the forest is pretty lush and green, when one of us sees a small patch of white coming through the woods. I mean, it stood out quite easily in contrast to the green leaves, so we decided to investigate, and the three of us headed off in directions towards this mysterious white spot coming through the leaves. If you've ever walked through dense woods, you'll know how difficult it is to go in a straight line because of fallen logs and brush. Anyway, we keep walking towards this object for what seems like a while, but this object still hasn't come into focus. It looks like it's a white blob, and it's just getting further and further away from where we spotted it. We didn't think too much of it at this point, or at least I didn't, and continued walking in the direction of this thing. It must have happened 2 or 3 times that we'd walk towards this thing for a few minutes, stop and notice that we aren't getting any closer. Now by this point, I think there was a little tension building, but nothing out of the ordinary. At some point though, as we're getting closer, we do notice the object is starting to fill out. We can clearly see now that it's a tiny white house on a hill. I'd say the structure was about the size of a shed you might keep your lawnmower in. We were excited because how often do you come across something like that? It's still a little ways away, but again, very obvious that this little white house is what we had seen and were walking towards. So we continue towards the little house, and we lose sight of it momentarily as we go up over another hill, but as soon as we come to the top of the hill, the house is gone. Now we're really confused and both look at each other but keep walking up the hill that we've seen the house on. This last part happened pretty quickly. We get to the top of the hill, still looking at the other hills close by to see if maybe we just turn around or something and we'd see the little house, until one of us noticed an old foundation at the grounds where there obviously a house had once been. The shape of the foundation was exactly the size of this mysterious vanishing white house. I barely had time to notice the foundation when all 3 of us heard a growl, which sounds like it's getting louder until it's almost as loud as a chainsaw. Nothing was said, but the 3 of us, including my dad's friends, all sprint out of the woods in the direction that we've come. I don't recall ever discussing what happened to the 2 other friends I was with that day. Since this happened, I tried looking on Google Maps for some kind of indication that the house was there, but it's just a forest which is too thick. About 1.5 years ago, I told my brother what happened and we went back into those woods looking for the house's foundation, but I didn't find anything. Although our search wasn't very thorough though. It was winter, so it's pretty cold and had snow on the ground. But it'd be hard to pick out where the house was meant to be because of the snow. Growing up, I'd spent much of my life playing outside with my friends. This is in the days before you had video games and things like that, so it was pretty normal to make your own fun. All I'd have to do is take my bike, and after riding for about an hour or so, I'd be with my friends. I know that sounds like a long time, but I lived out in the backwoods, miles away from cars, so it wasn't really dangerous and it didn't feel so long because you're out in the woods. Now, later in my career, I became a park ranger, so I kind of got used to weird people and weird situations, but this is something that I couldn't explain from my childhood. Now, this actually comes from a number of things that happened to me, which all led to one specific event. So let me begin. So, I was playing out with my friends on one particular day, and one of my friends swears that he's seen a house out in the woods, deep in the middle of nowhere, but he knows exactly where it is. He says, "God, there's a woman that haunts it and it's so scary. I really need you guys to see it." Now, we knew he wasn't making it up because when his brother came back from vacation, he was also saying the same thing. So one day we set out to find this. We had our bikes with us originally, but had to quickly dismount them. We decided to leave them because we knew it was going to be too difficult to proceed. There were rocks and things everywhere, so it was going to be really a headache to travel with them, so we decided not to. Now we do notice some people further up also on bikes, and one, we have no idea how that they could have been on bikes out here because of how rough the terrain is, and two, we've seldom seen people here, so we thought it was a pretty bizarre thing, but we don't think too much of it and continue on. Now finally, this friend almost immediately gets lost and can't figure out where it is. He's basically adamant to not give up on trying to find it, but he doesn't really have a clue of where he's going. The nature's very nice though, but we're on quite a narrow path which is quite sheer. If you fell, you wouldn't really break anything, but you definitely get hurt. I've actually had the honour of falling in once and it wasn't fun. I ended up getting quite a lot of cuts and things and messed up some of my clothes, which was quite annoying. Now after not too long, my friend finally gives up and says that we're not going to find this place. I say yeah, that's fine, and we decide to start heading back. Now I kid you not, just as we've started to turn around, we hear a really deep banshee type scream, one that echoes off the surrounding hills. It was far too loud to be a person. At the very least it would have been a large animal, but upon listening to the scream over the 2 seconds it lasted, you could hear some distinct words being spoken, and that was to get out. It's very hard to really figure out exactly what this voice was saying because I had so much adrenaline that I just couldn't focus on what I was hearing. But I look at my friends, and my friend who then led us out there confirmed that yes, he actually heard the same thing. Now we're panicking. As you can imagine, being young kids, we basically scream too and sprint out in the opposite direction. The best part about this is that we don't really know where we're going, and we ended up getting more lost in the woods. Now it ended up getting really bad because it starts to get dark, and one, I don't want to lose my bike. My parents have only just got me it, and growing up I really didn't have much money. So if I lost the bike it was going to be a big thing, but yeah, I really couldn't find it, and that was quite worrying. And two, I didn't want to be out here in the dark with the demon. And my parents were going to kill me if I wasn't back in time. Filled with more rage now, I start strutting around trying my very best to find where the bikes could be, and thankfully we found them. Now we all split off in our different directions, and none of us really say anything. We're just rushing to try and get back home. I've never pedalled so hard in my life because I was absolutely convinced that the demon thing was going to chase after me. I know now it could have just been a person out there, or maybe a large animal. That was probably the biggest threat, but I guess back then you really don't think like that. So I was pretty concerned by this, and I well and truly didn't feel comfortable. I just knew that I had to find my way home safely. So I get in and I get banned from being on my bike for a while, which was really annoying. I didn't really explain what had happened to my parents. I knew I was going to be grounded, and I thought, you know what, this is going to be a lot worse for me if I say what's actually happened. I know looking back on it now, I should have probably explained because it could have been a really dangerous situation. Who knows what was out there that day? Well, I'll tell you who doesn't know, me. So now fast forward a couple of months. My friend is still going on about us trying to find this place, and I kind of didn't want to this time. Normally I'm one of the real adventurers in the group, but I just couldn't be bothered. I didn't want to lose my bike luxuries again because I've just lost them, but he persists, and I guess we had nothing better to do, so I say sure. Now, I remember the day that we're going to set off again. He said that he knows the exact place this is. You know why? He said he had a dream about it. Being young, I really bought into this and thought, you know what, this time we're actually going to find it. So, we're riding down the path this time. We're actually on the more concrete area which leads into the main part of the forest, and we were going really quick. Next thing I know, I'm hitting the ground hard. My hands are stinging and something was off. I realise that I've crashed on my bike. I'd stupidly tried to go off onto what appeared to be a more flat part of the path, but I've gone straight over a big stone and ended up getting some cuts on myself. I didn't worry too much about it though. I was sat down for a while, and I tell my friends that they should just go on without me and that I need to get back home. I was young, but I was still quite concerned by this and ruining my clothes. I didn't want to get blood all over them. I know I have to get back to my mum. Now my friends, being the great friends they are, say sure and head off without me and leave me there. I look at the bike and it seems a little bit stuffed at first. I can't get the wheels to turn, so I ended up just laying there for a while. Now that's when I noticed someone. There's an elderly woman approaching. She's coming from just beyond the tree line up to my right. I look ahead and see if my friends are there to confirm if they're seeing this too, but they aren't. They're long gone. I'm a little bit worried now and very hastily get up and start trying to make my bike move. I'm trying to get the wheels to work, but I just can't seem to do it. For some reason I had a feeling that she was coming to help me, but she gets a little bit closer and just stops, smiling at me. Now she has some of the most jagged and rotten teeth that I've ever seen before. It's like this person had never seen a toothbrush in their life. Weirdly, their clothes didn't seem too dirty considering that she's just come from the forest and surely they should have some markings on them. She's wearing a kind of dark coloured dress, but it looks pretty immaculate. If I had to guess her age, I'd say she's probably about 70 or 75. I'm not too sure. I wave at her and don't get anything back. I then say hello, and suddenly her expression changes, looking completely blank, almost like it's looking through me. Now that was creepy. I can't really make out much about her eyes because she has pretty bloodshot eyes, so I quickly get my bike, pick it up, and thankfully the wheels start moving while I'm walking. I look over my shoulder and I can still see her there watching me. For some reason I wasn't overwhelmed with fear by this, as I know a lot of people might be. This is kind of uncharacteristic for me too, because often I am the scaredy cat, but not in this situation. I start pedaling slowly at first, but I then see that she's still there staring at me, and as you can imagine I picked up the pace pretty promptly. Now I ended up getting back home, and my mum's very concerned about me. Annoyingly, she put this stinging stuff all over my cuts. I mean, it's probably antiseptic whatever, but my god did it burn like I've never felt a burn before. Honestly, it almost sent my whole body into shock how strong this stuff is. It was so much so that I'd actually forgot about what had happened until my mum asked again. I say I crashed over the stone, and then the lady come. Mum says, "What lady?" and asks me to describe her. And I explain everything that happened, and she looks at me kind of weird. She knows that there's no cars around there for miles. It's just the paths. You might get the odd truck, but it was very uncommon. She tells me that if ever I see that lady again, to come straight back and don't try and talk to her. I say, "But Mum, I couldn't even talk to her." I get the reply of, "I don't want to hear it." I'm then grounded and lose my bike privileges again. So it's starting to get quite irritating now. So not only are my friends out having this great adventure, I've crashed my bike on flat ground, hurt myself and got grounded again. I was pretty worried now because usually my mum does the 3 strikes and you're out kind of way of things. If I lose a bike again, I don't know if I'll see it again. So I'm pretty upset. Now eventually my mum does release me from her prison and I'm allowed to go out. And I catch up with my friends and ask them what happened. They then say that they still couldn't find it and I started laughing. They then ask why I'm not allowed on my bike and I explain and my friend says that's her. That's the lady who lives there. I say, "What do you mean?" He says, "The lady that haunts the house, you saw her." And I'm not buying any of it. I say, "The day I believe you is the day I see the house." And what happens? Nothing for the next 2 months. until eventually I get my bike back and it's time to go out once more. In the time without my bike, I'm actually super bored because I'm basically stuck indoors all day and I'm just watching the days go past. I did get some video games in, so I just killed hours on it, but it couldn't compete with being with my friends. Now, we decide that we're going to set out one last time to try and find this house. Again, I really don't believe it's there. I don't believe any of it's true, but my friend constantly goes on about it. So now, we get on that path once again, and this time I'm constantly scanning the ground. I'm very scared to go over another rock again and get hurt. It's not actually the feeling of crashing that actually bothers me, it's more the fact that I don't want to have a crash and get that stinging stuff on me. The thing was, at this point, even if we did find anything, I was sure to just lie about it, because I think, what's the point of telling my mom about what's happened if I'm only going to get grounded again? So I swear that no matter what happens, I'm not going to tell her anything. Now we were riding for miles and miles, and eventually my friend said stop, and we all stop. He says leave our bikes here. We take them off to the side and actually throw them into the bushes so people can't find them. They're pretty well concealed now, which is something we're all happy about. Now we get up and we start going through the woods on this little path. My friend is absolutely convinced and certain that this is the way that we need to go to be able to get away from everyone and finally find where this house is. He says this is it, this is what I found before. None of us really believed him, but I guess being gullible, part of us wanted it to be real. Now we walked for miles and miles, and we still don't seem to be getting any closer to anything. I tell him, really, is this actually a thing or is it just a figure of your imagination? He then says be quiet, and I don't, I just keep on going until eventually, there it is. In a break in the trees you can see an old white house. It kind of looked like an old English cottage but slightly bigger. It certainly looked old and very abandoned. It was 2 stories tall and looked like nobody had been there for as long as I had been alive, at least 5 times over. Now at this point I get a little freaked out, but my friend is persistent that we have to press forward to find it. We have to go in there. We have to know that it's real. I agreed, kind of getting more and more excited at this time. As we start to step towards it, a crow must have broke out of a tree nearby and it really made us jump. All of my friends are laughing at me for being so scared, but I don't know, I felt extremely on edge in this situation and it's kind of like something I haven't felt before for a long time. Even working now as a ranger, I still haven't had that feeling. I think I was too on edge. I was too ready for something to happen. Now we go a little bit further ahead, and then I can see some kind of movement. It almost looks like there's a cat or something in one of the top windows moving round. It's all black, I can't see eyes, but I knew something was in there. I think maybe it's an animal. And we continue going forward. I don't know, I'm getting a really bad feeling about this, one of my friends says. But again, we say that we've come this far and that we need to figure out what this is. And so we press forward even more. Now eventually we get up to where the door was. And I, probably being the bravest at the time, decided to step in first. And this place smelled really weird. It was kind of like an old smell. One that I hadn't smelt before, and something smelt really bad in there. I didn't know what it was. I kept on and on searching for the source of the smell, but I really couldn't find anything. So that was something quite strange. I just expected either something to jump out at me constantly, or to see some kind of dead animal or thing there to make sense of the smell, but again, there's nothing. Now, I decided to go up the stairs to see what else is up there, and this place looks like it is from about the 1800s. There's no furniture or anything. There is a picture on the wall, but it's all faded off and you can't really see what it once was. I don't think it was a picture, but some kind of portrait. but it's gone now. I then see a big spider go up the wall and I really don't like that. I'm looking for the cat though and I can't find it. I think this is odd, so I continue my search. I was sure I saw something in here. Even if it wasn't a cat, I just had the urge to know exactly what it is and just figure out what was going on up here. Now, I end up going further ahead, and while my friends are down, I realise that there's an upstairs area. There are stairs that go up another level. I go up the stairs and I can see a suitcase. I don't see anything else there, and I decide that I'm going to open it up. I have to know what's in here. Even if it's bugs or something, I really want to know. As I go to open it, I hear a sound behind me. It's movement. I'm not bothered, I think that it's one of my friends, and I slowly turn around, and there I see it. A woman crouched in the corner, staring at me. I then realise this is a woman that I saw before, and she slowly smiles at me. I drop the suitcase down immediately. It startles me, but not her. One of my friends then joins me on the stairs and screams the second he sees the woman. Something about her didn't look real or human. The next thing I know, we're sprinting down those stairs. They felt impossibly long. It was almost like it had doubled in length. My other friends were also screaming now, and we all come flying out of the house, saying, "What was that? What on earth was that?" I say I don't know, and we start explaining to the others what we saw. One of my friends is constantly looking around, and he swears that he can see someone staring at us out of the window. We don't bother looking around. I mean, me and the guy who saw it, we just keep running. We were surprisingly fit, as we probably made it about 500 meters before slowing down again. We all stopped for a moment, now feeling safe that we're away from the house, saying, "What did we see?" No, none of us can agree on exactly what we saw. We keep looking around to where the house is, but weirdly we can't find it. I know that we run off and we're quite worried and disorientated, but we should be able to see the house, so it doesn't make sense why it's not there. I start to kind of lurch backwards a bit as I realise that the fear's really taken a toll on me. It's like my vision's gone a bit weird. We then start moving again. We start running as quick as we can, and we're trying desperately to locate our bikes. We eventually come back to the main path, but our bikes are nowhere to be found. Of course not, how could we possibly find it out here? How are we going to be able to differentiate it from the surroundings when everything looks the same? We didn't think of this at the time. I didn't even care about the bike. Now the thing that makes this suck is it's going to be a long journey back without the bikes, but we just can't find them. I do want to search for a bit longer, but my friends are all too scared, and we take off running again. We don't get too far as we're really tired now, and we have to start walking. What's worse is we've got about 2 hours of daylight now ahead of us. We're all discussing, running through the probabilities of what it was, and suddenly I get annoyed at the friend saying, "Why didn't you tell me that was there?" He says, "I can't know what's up there, I've never been in there before." We all look at him then, kind of annoyed, as if to say, "Well, why didn't you let us know that before?" He doesn't reply though. And eventually, we get to the part where we have to split ways. We all say goodbye to each other, and I watch my friends go off in different directions. I don't know why, I just felt the need to stop there for a second or so, just to try and figure out, or at least make sense of what had happened, but I can't really make sense of anything. I then think, God, my bike, this isn't good, I'm going to be in so much trouble, and I start to fabricate an excuse to my mum as to what's happened to my bike, so at least then maybe she won't be too annoyed at me. It was stolen, that's it, I'm going to tell her it was stolen. Eventually, after a 2-hour walk, I get home just before the sunset. My mum can see me without my bike and says what happened, and it was stolen, Mum. I think a kid stolen it. Weirdly, she wasn't annoyed at all. She said, "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, honey. We'll get you another one. Dinner's ready." I'm really surprised and I take my food and go and sit in my room to eat it. Now fast forward to all these years later, and even in my current line of work, I've never seen anything so strange and I still can't really make sense of it all. I don't know what I could have possibly seen up there. I'm just glad that I wasn't the only person to have seen it and somebody else did, because if it was just me, I probably... Now I've been camping in this one spot in the middle of a national park in NC in the wilderness for years. Here are my stories. So in September 2017, a friend and I went camping here for a long weekend, and we've participated in a local paddling festival. He ended up being almost 10 hours late, so I wandered around in the wilderness for a while. In retrospect, this feels crazy. I found a giant, and when I say giant, I mean industrial-sized refrigerator about 10 yards in the woods from where I set up camp. Fast forward to when my friends joined me. So the 8 strangers who set up camp about 15 yards north of us, which isn't a big deal. When it's Monday morning though, and we have to part ways, we notice that the fridge is gone. We checked the river and that was just west of our sight and it hadn't fallen in. We thought that maybe the campers north of us had taken it, but the thing was at least the size of a smart car and inches sunken into the ground. I've gone back since and I'm still haunted by the whole incident. Now in February 2018, a friend of mine and I went camping during the week of our college having a break. She'd never been camping before and I felt somewhat scared connecting that site to what I felt like was a no. Better introduce her to a camping place that's better though than drag her into the backcountry of the NC mountains in winter. So we set up camp and went for a somewhat local hike, and we were hiking northbound. A younger attractive couple passed us going southbound. Now, we remember their faces well, or my friend does, and this becomes important later on, which is good since I have difficulties with facial recognition. We get some dry firewood from the closest Walmart since it's been snowing all day, and when we return it's pitch black outside. On the dirt to the site, maybe a mile out, we pass a car facing us. On the side of the road, it's actually parked up with its hazards on and honked randomly. I attempt to see if any of the owners need some help, but we're 2 young college women in the woods by ourselves and we don't want to tempt fate. As I slowed, we saw the 2 people jump in the river with their flashlights. Now, my friend swears that they were the couple from the hike. A couple nights later, we stood around our measly fire, dampened by the continual snowfall, when I suddenly but surely lose all sense of direction. Even though I'm looking at the fire listening to my friend talk, I cannot tell if I'm facing the road, the car, her, the tent or the river. And this feeling lasts for a couple of minutes and I don't remember her saying anything else at the time. Once I calm down a bit and move towards the other side of the fire, I feel somebody behind me and I hear the jiggle of what sounds like keys. My keys are in the tent and there were no other campers for miles, at least that I was aware of. I was just paralyzed with fear and kept feeling this dark, heavy kind of presence creeping up on me. It felt like it's right on my heels about to grab me, and I punch up behind me but feel nothing. We ended up leaving the campsite the next day due to snow. Okay, now, my dad told me a story recently that I've really been wanting to share on here. This is from back when I was a kid in Mexico. When my dad was a kid, he and my grandpa went to my grandpa's land to prepare the soil for planting crops. Bored, my dad wandered off to a nearby stream where he saw a bunch of human-like dolls playing around in the water. He said they looked like their adults, only smaller, with proportions like dolls. Not exactly sure what that means. They splash around in the water and at times, it looks as though they're walking on it. They signal at him to come and play with them, and my dad actually runs over to this excitedly. He said he played with them for a while when my grandpa noticed that he had wandered off and went to find him. When my grandpa found my dad seemingly playing alone by the stream, getting all wet, he got super mad and dragged him away. Apparently, my grandpa and grandma were never able to see what exactly was waving goodbye to my dad. After that, my dad started seeing this geoneds around the house. They'd pop out from behind walls during dinner, and my dad would try to feed them scraps of food, much to my grandma's annoyance. Eventually they get worried and go to a local curandera. She had a little ritual and told him to keep a cigarette behind his ear for a week, and then they were gone. So it turned out that the grandparents were also able to see them a bit. My dad swears that it's all true though. Nobody ever really believes him and he's embarrassed by the story. The only reason that he told me is because my mum teases him about it and forced it out of him. This story occurred from when I was in high school around 2010-ish. My parents' house backed up to a small wooded area. It's not a forest by any means. There were walking trails and other neighbourhoods around it, but the woods were big enough that we used to see deer and the occasional fox. There was also a small creek that ran through it. I used to spend time in the fall/winter poking around there, but it obviously wasn't obscured by brush then. I found what I assumed was likely a deer path that ran all the way up to my old elementary school, which was about a block away via roads, but using the deer trails took about 10 or 15 minutes. I was back in this fairly often, which meant the following story was weird. I went down to the creek one day and followed the trail like normal, but this time I found a partial deer skeleton at the end. The head and legs were missing. The rest was still there, but there was no blood, and that was strange. They were stripped completely clean, I mean even the bones, and they're bright white. At the time, there weren't any coyotes in the area like there are now, and I've never seen a bobcat there. To this day, I have no idea how the skeleton actually got there, or what happened to it. It was too clean to be a predator kill, and that doesn't explain why the front half of it was missing. I got so freaked out that I actually never went back to those woods again. Now a couple of years back, myself and my mother were visiting her sister in the north of the country. A few hundred miles from where we lived, my mum had decided to drive rather than take the train, and after staying the weekend, we started our return trip. We left on a Monday morning, but as the distance to our town was so great, we called in with my mother's friend with the intention of spending the night. It was a really nice house, but it's literally in the middle of nowhere, at least a mile from the next nearest house and miles again from the nearest town or shop. As we get close to the house, a huge summer storm hit, torrential rain, thunder and lightning. It turned out to be quite lucky. We had planned to stay overnight at that place because the driving conditions were so dangerous. The house was undergoing a massive interior renovation at the time, which meant that my mum and me would be spending the night crashing in the living room as all the spare bedrooms were out of commission. Once the workmen had left for the day, we spent most of the day and that of the evening on the back porch watching the storm before we turned in for the night. I crashed on the couch while my mum took a leather divan style sofa that was placed directly under the window that faced away to the driveway. Late into the night, I woke up feeling very uneasy, as if I'm being watched. I opened my eyes but didn't move anything other than my head towards where my mum was sleeping. There was a hooded black figure standing at the window over my mum, with his hands up to the window, trying to see if anybody was there or anything like that. Now I should mention that the driveway had a very powerful light fixed on a pole at the edge of the front yard. My mum, exhausted from driving, was completely out of the count, despite the window being no more than 18 inches from her face. The figure continued to slowly scan the room, then stopped, suddenly, as if he'd just seen me. The yard was positioned so that no light was cast into the house, so the room was completely pitch black. By now, the severity of the storm had increased and thunder and lightning were striking frequently. As though on cue, a lightning strike hit what seemed to illuminate the whole room. Now the figure actually moved from his vantage point and started walking towards the right-hand side of the house, where there is another window offering a better room and a better view of everything. Without saying anything, I waited until the figure's out of sight and I slid off the couch, scuttling into the doorway just off the living room and out of the second window's line of sight. I peek from behind the wall and can see a figure at the window. By this time, I was freaked and unsure exactly what to do. Lightning hit once again, and the figure snapped his head right to where I was hiding. I remembered being almost frozen, feeling his eyes which are locked onto me. He left the second window and headed back towards the first. I somehow managed to move, running the stairway in the corner room that led up to the bedroom of my mother's friends. I burst in shouting that there's a man there outside looking in. Once over the initial surprise of everything and waking them up in such a panic, my father, a large man in his own right, jumped up, summoning his eldest son who's a few years older than me, found some cricket bats and marches down the stairs. The rest of the family and myself followed warily. My mum, having been woken up, who was somewhat drowsy by the commotion, met us at the bottom of the stairs, having just passed in the hallway by her best friend's half-naked husband, toting a cricket bat and marching out into the storm. I explained what happened, but could tell my mum was in equal parts skeptical, as she was also shocked. We waited for what felt like an eternity in the darkness, as no one thought or perhaps dared to turn on a light. Mum's friend tried to reassure us that it's just a late-night traveller who had broken down or got lost. Her husband and son returned after a minute or two. The husband went as far as to get changed and check the ground before he hopped in his car and drove down the road a couple of miles in both directions. There was nothing else though. There had been no sound of a car leaving or the driveway or any physical evidence of anybody being outside. This basically did little to reassure me, and I was unable to shake the feeling of being watched, the same feeling that had originally awoken me. We managed a fitful night before we gathered our things and set out the following day. My mum was convinced though that I'd imagined the whole thing and told her friend's son by the way of apology. This annoyed me at first, although I knew it was the most logical explanation for them, as no one else had actually seen the figure. Looking to forget the whole experience, I did not argue this matter. As my mother said her goodbyes, I went and snapped a picture at the house before returning to find her waiting by the car and ready to go. I quickly popped my head in the house to say my own goodbyes and apologise for waking them from last night. Eventually the car horn kept sounding, with 2 long continuous beeps, and a third and final one which was a bit shorter. I then went outside the house to where the car was parked and it hadn't moved, and sat with all the doors closed apart from the passenger door to the driver's side, which is open. As I get in the car, I see my mum slumped in the wheel. Frantically, I pulled open the door, trying to shake her awake. I found the pulse on her neck, which seems to be strong, but it seems to be unconscious. I pulled her out of the car and shouted to help as I dragged her into the house. I sat her on the couch, and it's the same one that I slept on the night before, and with the help of her friend managed to bring her around from what I assume is a fainting spell. Thankfully she revived quickly and within an hour was ready to hit the road. Her friends were more than happy to let us stay for the day, and we were quite against her driving anyway. After what had happened, though, she was keen to get home and I was not keen to spend another night there, although I was still feeling guilt as I wasn't too brave to really talk her out of driving. She didn't remember passing out or even getting into the car. Now, about a year ago, my girlfriend and I were on a trail at Lemonil Lake in northern Nevada. It's about 1.5 miles each way, I believe. Usually pretty well populated. It was that day as well. There were at least a handful of people on the trail here and there, plenty down at the trailhead and parking lot. It was otherwise a totally normal sunny day. Evening come quite quickly and we started heading back down, not wanting to be out when it got dark as there was no cell service up here for quite a distance and it was just an afternoon hike. We started down the trail and I got to the slightest hint of a bad feeling, like we definitely needed to get back to our car before it got dark. I think that's generally just common sense and doesn't need to be prompted by a sixth sense or anything. Still, I keep an eye out as we went. Weirdly, absolutely nothing happened until we're maybe 300 yards away from the parking lot. The trees had largely been left behind as we descended in elevation, and bushes, large and small, were instead there. There was a creek that ran through to our right. Ahead of us, maybe 50 yards away, was a lone woman and her medium-sized dog on a leash. Now, I've got my head on swivel the whole day because I was just trying to keep an eye out and make sure that the hint of bad feeling didn't amount to anything which I was carrying. The woman ahead of us was up about the same distance for a while down the trail, and I felt somewhat reasonably safe with her there. If anything was strange to happen, it would probably be mountain lions which are known to live up there. Now, as we were walking, me and my girlfriend both heard what sounded like a big boulder sliding and grafting along a stone surface. It lasted like a few seconds and we were both looking at the stone surface about 600 meters to our left. Now, fully expecting basically a landslide, but there was nothing, and daylight was good enough to see if anything was coming from there, and there definitely wasn't anything. I immediately looked to the lady ahead of us, and just a second later, she and her dog started booking it. Right as they did, a herd of deer came sprinting out of the bushes, away from the boulder. Now, they ran across the creek and kept going to our right. After now pausing for a second to discuss that weird noise and what it could have been, I then drew my gun. We passed the same little section where the lady was when she took off, and thankfully nothing happened. I didn't really hear or see anything in those bushes, though I'm not surprised. A whole herd of deer was in there and we couldn't see them until they literally ran out, despite being at greater elevation at this time. We quickly made it back to the parking lot and I put my gun back in its holster. It felt safe getting to the pavement for some reason. We caught up with the woman and dog. She started to catch her breath and was panicking a little. We asked if she heard the weird sound and she said she heard the loud bouldery sound, and then off to her left close by she distinctly heard a big low growl, and then she heard the deer coming. The deer would have probably ran right into her if she didn't move. Watching this happen from afar above was just weird. We've determined that it could have been a mountain lion, but I've still got two questions. Why did I get the feeling that we needed to leave ever so abruptly, I mean an hour before anything happened? And why/how was it able to make the big sound of boulders moving, and then the woman heard a growl? But why was it not by us? I think this indicates that there was definitely something in those bushes. However, I'm very confused about the bigger sound. I doubt the same animal had made a huge boulder scraping sound, so there was probably two of them, but I never really got to figure out what this could have been. Last summer, a good friend and I embarked on a backpacking trip through the White Mountain National Forest in New Hampshire. As fairly experienced day hikers, we felt comfortable in the Whites for our inaugural overnight trip. While planning, my buddy Ellis figured that we could hike to a country and make our way into the first wilderness night, which is more fun. I wasn't going to disagree. Beautiful views, historic trails, and protected night in the drive of a wilderness. I was stoked, to say the very least. Now, before any hiking trip, I do a little internet search on the trails or shelters that I'll be crossing. Throughout the mid to late 1900s, there were a series of these lean-to ups and downs on the dry river, which are meant for backpackers or through hikers really looking to escape the crowds in more popular areas of the forest. Though as time went on, the Forest Service had more and more pressing matters to deal with. Therefore, many of these shelters were actually dismantled, except for Dry River Shelter number 3, the last remaining shelter in the wilderness zone. On the morning of our hike, I met my friend at the trailhead and we set off. The sky was overcast, bringing with it a dense fog through the forest. The weather left us with nearly no visibility. There were stunning views, and at least the trail consisted of a prime, technical New England rock scrambling alongside the river. Now my friend and I made it up the Presidential Ridge, stopping by the Lake of Clouds. The hut was filled with day hikers, backpackers and through hikers all socializing together. We were even rewarded with some more sun and a brief glimpse of the Dry River Valley on the summit of Mount Monroe. Before the fog rolled back in, we'd see that there's dwindling views and stiff wind, so we decided to hustle below the tree line down to the Dry River Shelter 3. This will be our home for the night. Once we dropped off the ridge into the valley, we entered the wilderness zone, where rangers patrolled sparingly. Time to really be alone, I thought. As we trekked into the wilderness, all signs of civilization disappeared, and the trail was densely overgrown. Although it's been raining all week, there were no footprints in the mud either. At least we would have some relaxing isolation together, I figure. After about an hour or so of descending, my friend spotted the lean-to just as our legs were asking for relief. A gorgeous old timber structure with a well-used fire pit alongside a cold mountain river. I mean, this is well and truly pristine camping. As we settled in and explored the site, I found a small bound notebook nestled into the corner of the structure. On the cover somebody wrote, Dry River Shelter 3. Out of curiosity, however, I opened it, but found nothing more than a lone man's name scribbled onto the first page and a date. Now, just your standard camping log. Oddly though, the man had signed the book the prior day, but we see no evidence or signs of humans or even animals or disturbance upon the trail here at the shelter. The rain can actually wash away tracks, but not all signs of animal life. Something felt off to me. I showed it to Ellis, who found it curious, but nothing more than the single name. He convinced me that the man was probably a hiking veteran and professional LNT. I brought this into my friend's thoughts though, and the situation eases my mind now. As the sun set, we started a roaring fire alongside the riverbank. My friend commented on how quiet the location is, having not seen another soul beyond the chirp of birds since leaving the Crawford path. The silence was eerie, but we figured that the city life desensitized us to the wild. The sun was setting and we grew tired and into the darkness. My friend took the lean-to and I spent the night in my tent. Sleep comes quickly after hiking 8+ miles with the 20 pounds on my back, but this didn't last too long. A brutally sharp slapping noise woke me. The only thing I could compare the noise to would be somebody swinging a 2x4 into a tree and a snapping thick branch. I figured it was a bear coming for our food bag, hanging in the tree, maybe 10 to 50 yards away. Nothing out of the ordinary for New Hampshire. Sleep overtook me once again, and I remembered waking up to the sun rising over the peaks. I stumbled out of my tent to see my friend also waking up slowly. As we made our morning oats and coffee, I wandered around the site again to see if I could find the marks that the bear had left. Instead, I noticed something strange. The small notebook was open. I swear that I put it back where I found it. I closed it and put it to the corner of the shelter, not on the floor. I say, hey, were you checking out the camp log last night? No, I passed out, man. It's not like there was anything in there to read anyway, he responded. Are you sure? I commented as I bent over to pick it up. The lone hiker was not so lonely anymore. At least 20 more filled the pages. The lone traveller, whose name was originally on the first page, could now be found several pages deep into the notebook. I tossed it to my friend, whose face instantly dropped the second that his mind registered what page is on. Great. Now I know that it wasn't just delusionalness from dehydration. Wow, we must have seen things last night. There's no way that we missed all those names. How could we? Both of us. This is when I began to tell my friend about the slapping noise the night before. I received nothing other than instant denial. These sounds were not the result of some hooligans or backward crazies harassing us. Rather sternly, my friend says, "It's a bear, Jack. It's a bear, Jack. Let's go now." And we did go. My friend led us out of there. Now, a year has passed since, and I'm not quite sure what happened that night, on that dry river shelter number 3, that lonely day. The memory of seeing the note so clearly laid out was so crisp in my mind, I could not have mistaken it. Could I have mistaken the noises I heard before, and the new additions? I don't think so, especially not having my friend there too. So what was it? What happened to us that night? Now the following is a series of weird things that happened to me that I truly can't explain. Now what annoys me most about this is that I've tried to tell people my experience and they kind of just laugh it off. Actually, I told one of my colleagues at work today, I work as a Forest Server fire patrol person, but when I told them my story, they kind of just laughed at me and said, "Oh yeah, is that really what happened?" And that really annoys me. And this is supposed to be someone that's quite similar and that I'd actually consider a friend there, and also had weird experiences before, so I just don't get it. People are so eager to hear what you say, but then they're so happy and quick to dismiss everything. I just don't get it. But let's dive into my story and hopefully at least a few of you will understand. Now, emotionally, I wasn't really the same after this. I don't know why. I'm not a spiritual person and I don't really believe in religion much, but this kind of made me think about what else is really out there. Where I live, there can be lots of snow all the time, but I love to go on my little adventures, and there was a forest that was supposedly haunted near where I lived. Now I'd heard quite a few things about this place, and apparently you'll hear screams in the night, you'll see headless people wandering around, and I guess just the works really. Now I'd actually been here on 2 occasions before. One was when I drove out with one of my friends, but to be honest, it was just the biggest waste of time. I mean, literally nothing happened. We were driving for a long time to get there, and basically nothing happened, and we just get bored and come back. So I wasn't expecting too much in the second time that I'd been there. Again, nothing had happened, but in more recent times, I'd moved much closer and thought, why not go? Also, there was quite a nice snowfall, so I thought this was pretty cool. I really like going on adventures at night time like this, especially when the elements are involved. For whatever reason, it kind of makes me feel almost like I'm in a movie, especially if I've got my AirPods with me and I just listen to songs, and it really creates a vibe. I always found it empowering, but yeah. So I set out at night, and I walked towards the forest off of the main path, and it's really dark. The stars are looking absolutely beautiful above me, and luckily there's no cars coming, so I just get off and straight into where the forest starts. There was probably about 30 meters of snow or whatnot before it actually starts. Then you're hit by lots of trees. Now I turn my flashlight on and suddenly I can see really well. I had a really powerful one that was actually adapted for cameras and stuff. I was actually joking with one of my friends, it's like turning on the daytime and there's nothing to be scared of. And I also said that this probably scares away the spirits more than anything. They probably think it's God. I think of these jokes as I can see my breath in front of me from the cold. Now, it's kind of like the snow that's fallen quite quickly to the ground, almost like it's kind of sleet, but it's not. It's still snowing. I notice it as I take my first steps into the forest. I have some pretty skinny trees on either side of me when I see something that looks odd. I can see what appears to be a white silhouette to my left when suddenly it vanishes. I'm a little confused by this, but suddenly I realise that it must be my breath from where I've got my scarf and things. I think it's a little odd and I tell myself just relax a bit and I keep walking. The trees are kind of like overarching here and it actually looks really beautiful. I do notice one odd thing. There seems to be footprints that lead off from the main trail, but they kind of look like hoof shapes. I thought maybe some kind of animal went through here, or God knows what. It couldn't have been horse riding because the branches are actually too low. To give you an idea, they're probably about 8 feet above me or dropping down to 5, so you'd have to duck sometimes. Now these aren't nice branches too. They're the kinds that come snagged on each other, and if you make one loose, it's going to kind of whip you in the face. And I didn't want to lose my eyes. But it wasn't too much of an issue really. So when I set off, I didn't really have a direction or place that I wanted to go to. I heard there was an old church that used to be here and I thought, you know what, that would be pretty cool if I can find that. Who knows what would happen if I go there on my own. Now at the time, I was certain no other people around because I literally can't hear anything or see anyone. A really good telling sign is the fact that there's no lights. You kind of need lights to see where you're going out here, but I literally couldn't see any. Every so often, I look off into the woods and I don't see anything. I did notice one or two strange sounds, but they didn't happen too frequently. I know that there's lots of animals out here because of my normal line of work, and just I guess from having some good sense about my surroundings, so I didn't let it put me off. I knew I had to be careful of certain animals out here because I guess some could hunt at night, but I was going to be far bigger and they wouldn't dare go to me. The sky almost looks like a beautiful orangey colour above me because of my torch, and I think that's really pretty. I do start to feel the cold a bit now, so decide to pick up the pace. Another interesting thing is there's lots and lots of footprints on this path which have been here earlier. And I think that's a little bit bizarre because usually people don't hum here too often. I'm very used to going out here and there's no one around. So that was interesting. As I'm walking, the snow's now going directly into my face and it actually made it a bit annoying, to be honest. I stopped for a moment to try and figure out the direction of it so I can try and avoid it when I hear a howling off. Now I don't know exactly where it's coming from, but there seems to be another little trail where you can cut through going off of the main path, but I decided not to follow it just in case. I was kind of expecting to run into some crazy dog walker or something, but they never showed up, so I think this is a little bit odd. Eventually I come up to one of the trail signs and I can see some of the wildlife that lives here, and I think to myself, well, there's definitely nothing that's going to hunt me, as it's just birds and things like that. But I do wonder what the sound is that I heard. Now, I go a little bit further along, and eventually the snow picks up even more now. It felt a little bit different, and almost like the weather had become more hostile now. Again, I'm not a spiritual person, but it almost started to feel a bit more like the air was different here. Now, the only way I can describe what I was seeing if you haven't been in the woods at night in the snow is everything sort of looks like an infinite dream. It's almost like somebody's made an unlimited map of just forest, snow, woods, and it's just going to keep on going forever. You do have to be careful out here though, because if you really go off the path, then you don't want to be stuck out in the cold like this. As you can imagine, trying to get a fire going is not easy at the best of times, let alone here. As I'm thinking of this, I hear sounds up above again. I can hear somebody scurrying through the tree line. Well, at least that's what I think it is. And I pause for a second, and I go to switch my flashlight with one that has more of a focus beam. And I kid you not, as this is happening, I can see what appears to be a really small kind of lanky armed person scurrying through the woods. And I take a moment to figure out what this is. I quickly flicker on my other light, which is more powerful, and I don't see anything, so I just put it down to my mind going a little bit loose. I do have to say, I've never seen anything like this, and I think this is really weird. Annoyingly, my eyes didn't adjust well enough in the darkness to actually see this thing, and I have tried telling this part to some other people, but again, they all just say, oh yeah, it's just a rabbit. But I mean, come on, I've seen rabbits, and this thing had lanky arms. I can only describe it as if a person was about 3 feet tall, had a very large torso, and very long skinny arms that dragged the floor. But I don't know where they've gone. I tried looking around for more footprints, but I can't see anything, and this gives me a little bit of adrenaline to pick up the pace. I knew I'd gone out here hoping to find some ghosts and things, but now I wasn't so sure if I actually wanted to find them or not. Now again, I can see a mist form just in front of me, then slowly disappear again. It was a white mist, and it's really like somebody's just breathed in front of me and then vanished. I try and replicate how I was standing a few moments ago and pace backwards and start breathing more heavily to see if it was me, but there's nothing there. Pretty confused at this point, but I decided to just pick up the pace more. Now, I had one other scary experience before from being out in the woods I can think of now, but this was more to do with an animal than anything supernatural. I remember I'd gone somewhere and a big old moose appeared, and it was extremely close to me. For whatever reason, it didn't really take notice of me, it just looked at me for a second, but I remember that scared me. But that feeling that I had was kind of beginning to loom over me, and I started to wonder if maybe there was a large animal like that around. Now this is when I noticed the first strange structure. It's something that I hadn't realised before. It's a large wooden structure that looks like 3 trees, kind of in a Stonehenge shape, but a little bit less spread out. This is really weird. It's like they've been carved by hand and placed upright. And what was really bizarre is that there isn't much snow in the middle. It seems like the ground is staying particularly dry here, and not snow forming. Now, I think this is really bizarre because, well, where I am there shouldn't be anything like this. I would have been aware of it too, and I don't understand why I'd never noticed it before. It now becomes apparent that I'm not actually on the main path. I switch off my flashlight once more, and I just take a few seconds to take in everything. I'm trying to give my eyes some time to adjust to the darkness, and I look down at my battery. It's dropped down to 40% on the main flashlight thing, and that's a bit of a worry. Batteries drain pretty quick in the cold, and now I notice that there's more of the mist forming up ahead of me. I actually take a second just to assess what this actually is, but I can't figure out what it is. It's almost like a group of people standing there, kind of just like breathing or talking normally, but there's no one around, and it only seems to be spawning in a specific spot. Now, I once more get closer and try and figure out what this is, but I just can't. Now, it reminds me of a story of what one of my other Fire Ranger friends had told me about. Sorry to go off topic, but I think it's important because it might have been linked to what I saw. Now, one of my good friends had been working in the service for quite a number of years, and he would always try and prank us and pretend there was scary things out there. We never believed him, and sometimes he would actually get us with Halloween masks and stuff, and that was pretty creepy. But I remember one day that he come up to us and he looked very freaked out. He said, "Guys, I saw something and I don't know what it is." We ask him to elaborate, and he refuses for a while, but because I'm good friends with him, eventually he decides to tell me what he saw. Apparently, he thought he saw a fire, so he went over to investigate it. Apparently it was just a small red cherry glow, but that could be the start of something. Just as he got to where it was, it suddenly went out, and there was a very big mist that appeared, which is like a smoky white colour. It almost looked like there was a huge fire in terms of the amount of smoke, but nothing was burning. He said it stayed here for literally 3 or 4 minutes as he stared at this bewildered, until eventually it just vanishes. Now the reason that I'm telling you this is because it was incredibly similar to what I saw in terms of how he described it, the way that it moved, the slight opaqueness of it, everything was just weird. I stood there for what must have been about a good 4 minutes before eventually I decided that, yeah, I'm probably going to have to press through this now. I couldn't be waiting around here all day, and I decided to be brave and walk through it. I actually held my breath just before I did so because I didn't know if it was maybe some kind of dangerous chemical or something that had leaked out, but there wasn't anything. I eventually make it through after what felt like ages, to be honest, and I was actually gasping for breath. It probably took me a good 20 seconds to get through this. Eventually when I do, I turn around to try and figure out where it had gone, and I can't see it. I do think that I can see something just moving off into the distance, but I can't be sure. It was almost like a group of people had vanished, but one of them had just went off into the woods. Now, I'm a little bit freaked out, but again, I was here alone, so there's not really too much I can think of this. Now, I do notice something else very weird. There seems to be lots of really bizarre shaped footprints going off in different directions. They're all kind of like the hoof shaped, like the thing I'd seen earlier, but they're really far spread apart, like something quite tall had been walking. But it's walking as though that it's in complete arrogance to the trees that are there, like they don't exist. And again, I don't know what kind of animal could have done this. Now I walk on. I haven't really got a direction this time. I just know that I need to keep going. I have a feeling that I'm in a bad spot, and that's when I see something. This time I was certain that I was seeing something that was actually there. It was very far away, but I can only describe this as something which is completely black, with these white tusk arm things that was about 4 feet tall that hops around. I only saw this for a couple of seconds and it vanishes, but it's probably the scariest part of the encounter for me. I don't want to describe it as like a demonic thing because again, I'm not spiritual, but I don't really know what this was. It's like a really weird creature that would stand awkwardly and almost like it was just bent out too far and shouldn't be balanced, but it was. I flash on both the lights at the same time searching for it, but again, I don't see anything. I then realise that I'm not too far from a lake that I'm actually familiar with, and that's when I noticed a strange glow coming from the other side of it. Now, it was kind of like a glow of like a power plant would give, I guess, in the horizon. Almost like heat waves of light just emanating out slowly, again in the white colour, but almost having more of an energy to it. I decide that I have to investigate. Now, I was actually stupidly close to the shoreline now, because one slip, one twisted ankle and I could go through the ice and no one would get me here. I'd die of hypothermia before rescuers could find me, but the sense of adventure had taken over. I turn my light around again, and I can't see anything. For a second, I'm sure I can make out the faint glow of 2 eyes, but I don't know if this is just an animal, so I'm not too worried. There's also strange sounds coming from over where the light is, and it's almost like lots of people talking played backwards, really far off, really far, like barely audible, but I could hear it. The forest was pretty quiet at this time, and I think it made it worse. I'm constantly flashing around with my lights, trying to just get whatever this is to show up more, but I can't see anything. Now, I know some people are asking me why wasn't I more scared of that weird thing I'd seen, and to be honest, I can't tell you that. It was almost like I was drawn into something and a mixed personality had taken over where I was seeing weird things and they weren't welcoming, but they weren't worrying for whatever reason, like I had to go on further. I decided that I need to keep up my pace now, but I have some pretty good thoughts and I think, well, I don't want to fall in the water and die, so I go off now. At this part, the trees are a lot thicker than before, and that was a bit more reassuring. But that lake, I'm constantly hearing sounds from over where that lake is, and I just cannot for the life of me figure out what they are. I actually can't remember the sounds too well, and I don't know if it was because I was in a bit of a heightened state during the experience, but I just remember there were weird sounds, like scratching and things like that. Now I know it could have easily been a group of people on drugs or God knows what, but given the weather conditions, I think that's extremely unlikely. Again, this is something one of my incredible colleagues told me that that's what this could have been, and joking that it was green men and aliens, but I don't understand it, because again, these people are so interested to hear what I was saying, and maybe they're denying it because they're scared of what I'm telling them, or just refuse to believe it, but that annoyed me. And I've always been somebody who has the ability to break down the physics of things. If something has happened, I don't immediately go to the irrational explanation. I think with a scientific mind, but it failed me this day, because I can't come up with much for what was happening to me. Now I continue on as the snow gets a little bit thicker now. I think the reason for this might have been because there weren't as many thin trees blocking out all of the snow to capture it, just quite a few big ones with more space in between, but it did actually make my legs hurt. I noticed my knees are quite cold, so my remedy for this is once again to pick up the pace. I clear some of the snow that's actually settled on me, and I actually feel a bit better now. There's quite a big drop off down to the lake now, and I realise that I'm going uphill. What was weird though is that I haven't been to this area before, and I can't really find it. Even since I've been back to the forest again, I've never been able to find this exact spot. Now, it was like somebody had described the area that I was in to somebody else, and they'd tried to make it but not done it exactly the same, and you kind of know deep down that you're not in exactly the same place, but there's enough familiarity for you to feel confident in the situation. Now, as I get closer to the light that I could see, I realised that this definitely isn't the moonlight, because it was kind of flickering like it had an electrical energy to it, and was kind of flashing around into the clouds a little bit, not like lightning, but kind of like the northern lights, and that was what I find really bizarre. Just the whole energy of whatever this was is like nothing that I've ever seen before. A little bit scared now, I start to slowly pan around trying to see anything, but I can't find a thing. Every so often I hear sounds of movement behind me, but I can't be sure what this is. I decide that I just need to keep it moving, and that was one of the things that made me feel more safe in this situation now. I eventually come up onto the bend and I start approaching towards where the light is directly now. Now again, I'm not too scared or shy of adventures, so I have to keep pressing forward one step at a time. I do notice something odd, and that's that there aren't any steps up here. I know people might not have gone here in the daytime, but it does seem weird because there was just so many earlier that I'd seen pretty much everywhere. The snow had actually slowed down a little bit and it wasn't as abrasive on my face, and this was quite nice. My nose and toes always seem to suffer, especially in the cold, along with my hands. I think I have a problem where they don't have very good blood, or they just seem to switch off in the cold, but it made the going a little bit tough and less comfortable. Now, had I found the ghost that I was looking for? Not just yet. So I decide that I need to go towards the light, But again, the way that the light is kind of bouncing off the clouds, almost like it's the northern lights, was just really strange. I was incredibly drawn into this, almost like I was looking at a hypnotist's watch. It was incredibly beautiful, but just really weird. I didn't know if it was related to an electrical storm, but it wouldn't really make sense for me. I have seen something bizarre while working on the service, so again, a little bit similar to this. I remembered one time that I was working. I was actually in the station and I just made myself a coffee. I went to step outside and had a look around at the sky at night just because it's so beautiful, and I do notice something odd. There's almost like a large blue electrical ball of light in the sky. It's opaque and not really visible, and it only lasted for a few seconds, but it's like nothing I've ever seen before. A few of my colleagues had actually reported seeing it as well while on duty at the exact same time that I did, and this kind of had the same characteristics, but it wasn't identical. But I want to find out what this is, and I wasn't as scared as I was before. Now the closer I get, there's something else I notice which is pretty bizarre, and that's that the sky seems to be kind of imitating this very loosely. It's almost like somebody turned on a pulse of electricity through the clouds above me. It's almost like the northern lights are above the whole sky now, but extremely faint, but the same colour as the clouds, so again, it's almost like they were pulsating a bit. I did get scared because there's a eye condition that someone in my family has, which is actually a little bit similar to this, but I've been tested for it multiple times since and after this event, and it's always come up clear. But in the moment, I was pretty scared because I really worry about having issues with my vision. Now, luckily it turned out it wasn't my eyes, and I quickly did some tests by looking at the ground and things that weren't moving to realise that nothing was off. But why was the sky moving? I wasn't so sure what was happening, but I wasn't that far away now from where I needed to be. That's when I noticed another wooden structure. It's similar to what I've seen before, but it kind of formed more of a hexagon type of shape. Every so often I would see these on either sides of the trail, and they seemed to be increasing in frequency as I got closer to the light. I only saw about 3 more of them, but again, never seen it since. I stop for a moment, and I can see my breath on my light as I take my mask down just to try and get a better feel of what was happening. I shine the torch around, but again, I don't see much of anything. Don't know what I was expecting to see. I've just got the glow dead ahead of me now, and I know I have to get there. It's not much longer now before I'm there, so at least I've got that to look forward to, and I can eventually start heading back. I'm not sure how far I'd actually come at this point, but I've probably been walking for about a good 50 or 60 minutes. It doesn't sound like much, but usually you'll feel it more than I was in this situation, because walking in the snow is actually really difficult sometimes, and the cold can kind of zap out all of your energy. Now, I'm not too far away from where this is, and I can hear the voices again. It sounds like whispering. I can make out the odd word or two, but nothing seems to be in a language that I understand. It's definitely in a language though, and it hasn't increased in volume or anything since when I first heard it earlier. I don't know if it was there the whole time because I kind of just zoned out to it, but I suddenly noticed it much more than I had done earlier. And again, this is pretty weird to me because, like I said, I've never heard anything like it, and it was a bit creepy. Now, I eventually come up to the last clearing where the light should be, and I'm quite excited to get here. There seems to be lots of footsteps here everywhere, so I'm pretty convinced that I've made it back onto the main path now. I've got a good feeling now, and I know that there must be somebody there, so I feel pretty happy. So, what do? take my steps around it. I can definitely hear the voices on the right side of me now, and I keep stopping every couple of seconds to approximate exactly where it is. Every so often I see movement up ahead of me, and I'm convinced that it's people out here now, so I feel much more relaxed and reassured. I'm now going down the last straight part that I have to go to, with the trees kind of forming an arch above me, and the snow still everywhere around me. Now some people have asked me why did I keep going and what was I actually doing out there. That was my friends at work earlier, and I don't know. I guess it kind of felt like I'd been there for too long and I was at least going to get something out of it, and yeah. So I continue up and I eventually find where the clearing is, and I realise that I've only got about another 20 feet of a walk to figure out what this is, and I can see movement again. I decide that the best thing to do in this situation is just to slowly sneak up on who or whatever it is up ahead of me. Now yes, I've got them, I think. I can see some more lights ahead too. I'd see 2, then 3, then they go out. I don't have my light on at this point because I want the element of surprise. The snow is coming against me, but not directly in my face, so this is pretty pleasant. Now, I come up to where I can hear the voices finally getting louder and louder, and my excitement is growing. It feels like I've been here for too long trying to figure out what is actually going on, and I'm gonna get my taste of it soon. I am kind of looking over my shoulder every so often though, because I do hear sounds like I'm being followed. Again, I keep thinking I'm seeing movement, but there's not much of anything when I focus, so I try not to think of it. I don't actually have my torch on now, so I can't verify the fact that there's nothing there. But again, I just presumed it was people. And I thought, well, they haven't said anything to me, and I'm not disturbing them, so why are they going to be annoyed at me? It was almost like an overconfidence, and eventually, I come up to the tree line and the clearing. I start going a lot slower now as I get closer and closer to where I can hear them all. Now the chanting is still illegible, and I take my first step up, and I look around and I can see what must be hundreds of people all standing around the edge of some kind of clearing. They've all got their hands raised up and they're making some weird chanting sound. Now they're not actually that close to me, so it's pretty difficult to make out how tall they are, but these things seem really small. I say things because I don't know if they were people unless they were on their knees, but that's what it looked like. I start to shake a little bit as I feel a lot more like I'm in danger now. I decide that I'm gonna slowly turn my flashlight on for a second and figure out what this actually is. My eyes adjust more and more to the darkness every couple of seconds, and I notice something wrong. They don't look like normal people. The shape of them's all wrong and their arms are too long, and they're all either wearing some white things on their arms, but it looks very pointy, just like the things I'd seen earlier. I try as best I can to slowly flicker on the torch, but I cannot do it. Again, I start shaking more and more and try and press it, but nothing happens. I keep on and on flicking until eventually it flashes on, and for a split second I can see these things. They're like very dark small creatures with weird pointy arms, all facing up to the sky making some weird sounds. Their mouths are what really scare me. It's like just a circle with lots of jagged teeth. And just as I'm taking this all in, they suddenly vanish, and so does the sounds. I quickly fire the torch around everywhere trying to see where they've gone, but I can't see anything. I can hear my heartbeat in my ears like a constant rhythmic drum. And then, a few moments later, I hear movement. rustling and the sounds as though hundreds of people are all coming towards me suddenly, and I take off. I turn my torch on and quickly dart up ahead of myself, constantly looking over my shoulder with the torch. What I have just seen, I don't know, but I knew that I was in danger and had to get out of there. Luckily, I can retrace my footprints for most of the journey until I get away from the clearing. I can hear the sounds are still coming after me, just much slower than me, but they're still coming. I stop for a second and fire the torch around everywhere but can't see anything, and I drop it. Now, I managed to drop it not only into the snow, but face first, and that also means there's no light illuminating back at me, it's kind of buried. Just as I say to myself, you've got to be kidding me, I can hear something else not far up ahead of me. So I take off. Thank God I actually brought the other torch with me, because I'm absolutely certain at the fact that I would have had cardiac arrest otherwise. Now, the only problem I've got is the other torch isn't that easily accessible right now. I put it away when I was trying to hide and be not heard, but now I'm starting to think that wasn't really a good idea. And because I've had this on and so close to my face, I haven't really adjusted to the dark, and I don't know where I'm going. I used to be quite good at long distance cross country, so I have that in my favour. But I soon realise those years are way behind me, and I come up to a point where there's two paths. One's much smaller and seems untrodden but should be closer to where I need to get to. The other is what seems to be closer to where the light is, and I have to choose the latter. Now I take off down this path, and I keep fumbling trying to get the other torch on, but for whatever reason I just can't seem to do it. I don't know if it was for the fact that it was in the cold for too long, but in those moments it just would not come back to life again, and I'm just hitting it on my palm constantly. Now it's extremely difficult to navigate in this moment. I think I know where I'm going, but I can't really tell. There's clearly lots and lots of different footprints on this path, and I can't tell if they're normal or not because I was rushing so much, but it gives me some reassurance that I must be going in a relatively good direction to escape whatever this is. Now I should mention at this point that the sounds are long gone. I'd absolutely blitzed something that seemed like it couldn't go much quicker than a light walking pace, but it didn't matter. I don't know what was chasing me or why. I don't know what I'd just disturbed. Eventually, I flick my torch on again, and I illuminate the rest of the way back. I turn it off again quickly because I'm not sure how good the battery is and I really needed to conserve it. I stop for a few moments to collect my breath and look around me, and I think I know my bearings now, and I start to walk. The only reason that I had to walk now is because I was so out of breath and exhausted from moving in the snow that I genuinely was going to have to crawl the rest of the way out otherwise. I now make it up to another clearing where I can see the lake. I look around everywhere, and what's really weird, I can't see the light glow that I saw earlier. It's genuinely nowhere. I was convinced that I should still at least be able to see that out of all things, but there's literally nothing. I don't get it. And the sky, it still didn't look right, but it wasn't like before. So where did the light go? I didn't have much time to focus on it, but I was truly perplexed, and this is something that I still think about now. I managed to get my torch on again, and I don't know, it sounds stupid, but I was trying to recharge whatever energy it was and fire it around everywhere, hoping to see the light again, just to know it was there. But again, I don't see anything. Now, I'm pretty spooked out now, but I have to keep going. I eventually make it into a more familiar area, and I'm actually feeling confident finally. I've adopted more of a walking pace because I was a little bit worried that if anyone was out there and I ran up on them, they might think I was trying to attack them. I do stop constantly though, and look around, desperately trying to see something or anything around me, but again, I can't see anything or anyone. I was desperately hoping that I'd see a group of people just to explain what I'd seen, or at least to be able to tell somebody, but I can't see anything. The snow's picked up a little bit more now, and it wasn't pleasant. I realised too that I must have been out of here for quite a long while because the battery's virtually entirely drained on the torch. I know because it's gone pretty dim. I probably have the worst torch in the world because when the battery's low it goes really dim to conserve it, but it doesn't last very long, so what's the point? The other light that I have is far superior, but that's long gone. I decide to leave it for whatever's out there to enjoy it. I know I'm never seeing that thing again. I'm someone who usually hates losing things too, but I was so scared I didn't even think about trying to recover it. Now, the trees are getting thinner and thinner, and that gives me a pretty good idea that I'm not too far away from where I need to be now. I can't be 100% certain that I'm back to safety, but this is a pretty good indicator of it being the case. Now, I continue this walking pace, and I'm constantly looking behind myself. Now, momentarily, I start shaking again and don't know why. Then suddenly, I realise I hear something making a screeching sound. It's kind of at a medium volume, but it sounds like it's coming from exactly behind where I was. I'm not so worried now because with a few steps, I'm eventually back to where the forest ends, and I'm not too far from safety. I look around for anything to have been following me, but I can't see anything, and I quickly make my way over to my car. I start it up, turn the lights on full, and take one last look into the forest, and I can't see anything. I get back into my car and drive the rest of the way home, completely in shock about the whole experience. Now, I really don't know what happened to me that day, and I truly don't like sharing my story with colleagues at work because they don't really listen to me, but I know what I saw, and I don't know what it was. It could have been spiritual, it could have been anything, but I sure as hell don't have a clue what that was, and that scares me.